The train platform was supposed to be her fresh start. Instead, Maylene Zhao stood alone in the Montana snow, clutching a forged letter and the shattered pieces of a lie. No husband, no future. Just cruel laughter echoing from the station house and ice forming on her eyelashes. She'd crossed an ocean and a continent for this, to be the punchline of a stranger's joke. But when a golden-haired child stepped through the crowd and asked, "Can you be my mommy forever?" everything changed. Because sometimes the family you need finds you in the coldest, most impossible moment. If you want to see how far a stranger's kindness can travel, watch until the end. Then hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. The wind cut through Maylene's worn traveling coat like a blade through silk. She stood on the train platform in Billings, Montana territory, watching passengers reunite with loved ones while the December cold seeped into her bones. Her carpet bag sat at her feet, holding everything she owned: 2 cotton dresses, her father's medicine journal written in characters most Americans would never understand, and the letter that had brought her here. She pulled it from her pocket with trembling fingers, though she'd memorized every word during the 3-week journey from San Francisco. Dear Miss Zhao, I am a rancher of good standing seeking a bride of steady character and gentle temperament. I have heard Chinese women make loyal wives. If you are willing, come to Billings. I will meet the December 12th train. Yours in anticipation, Thomas Fletcher. The station emptied. Wagons rolled away. Families disappeared into the gathering dusk. No Thomas Fletcher appeared. You waiting on someone, miss? The station master approached, his mustache frosted white with ice crystals. Mr. Thomas Fletcher, Maylene said, her English careful and precise. Her father had insisted she learn it perfectly. In America, your words are your only currency, he'd told her before the fever took him. Spend them wisely. The station master's expression shifted, something between pity and discomfort. Ain't no Thomas Fletcher in these parts. Never has been. The words didn't register at first. Maylene blinked at him, snowflakes catching on her lashes. But the letter... Let me see it. She handed it over with numb fingers. He studied it briefly, then sighed. That's Tommy Briggs' handwriting. Stable boy over at the livery. Fool kids always causing trouble. He handed the letter back like it burned his fingers. I'm real sorry, miss. This was just some stupid prank. The platform tilted beneath Maylene's feet. 3 weeks on trains. Her last coins spent on fare. The boarding house in San Francisco already rented to someone else. An ocean between her and Guangdong, where her mother's family had made it clear she was no longer welcome after her father's death. Half-breeds bring shame, her uncle had said. Your Chinese blood is tainted by your mother's foreign weakness. Go find your fortune in her country. But her mother had been dead since Maylene's childhood. America was just a word in stories, a place she'd never seen until the ship deposited her in a city that smelled of fish and coal smoke. Now she stood in another strange place, surrounded by another language she understood but didn't belong to, holding another promise that meant nothing. There's a boarding house 2 streets over, the station master offered awkwardly. Mrs. Henderson might have a room. I have no money. The admission tasted like ash. His discomfort deepened. Well, the church might... He trailed off as voices rose from the direction of the station house. Did you see her face when she got off the train? Young male laughter, cruel and careless. Tommy, you're going to hell for that one. Worth it, another voice replied. Chinaman's daughter comes all this way for a husband who don't exist? That's comedy. The station master's jaw tightened. You boys shut your damn mouths. But the damage was done. Maylene felt every eye on the platform turn toward her, some curious, some pitying, some coldly indifferent. She'd been stared at her whole life. In Guangdong, for her mother's foreign features that marked her as other. In San Francisco, for looking too Chinese. Now here, for being foolish enough to believe in a stranger's letter. She picked up her carpet bag with as much dignity as she could gather, though her hands shook so badly the handle nearly slipped from her grip. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of these strangers who saw her as nothing more than entertainment. She made it 3 steps before a small voice stopped her. Are you hurt? Maylene turned. A child stood in the snow, no more than 6 years old, with golden curls escaping from beneath a knitted cap and eyes the color of summer sky. She wore a coat too large for her small frame and boots that had seen better seasons. Mayleen's throat closed around the words. She was hurt, not physically, but in ways this child couldn't possibly understand. The girl stepped closer, studying Mayleen's face with unsettling intensity. "You're crying. Papa says crying means something hurts inside where you can't see it." "I'm fine." Mayleen brushed at her cheeks, surprised to find them wet despite the cold. "Thank you for your concern." "You talk pretty." The child tilted her head. "Like music." Despite everything, something warm flickered in Mayleen's chest. "What's your name?" "Clara Ward." "I'm 6 3/4. What's yours?" "Mayleen Zhao." "Maylin." Clara tested the syllables carefully, then smiled. "That's pretty too. Are you lost?" The question was so earnest, so free of judgment, that Mayleen nearly broke down entirely. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I am." Clara considered this with the seriousness only children possess. Then she did something that would change the trajectory of 3 lives forever. She reached out and took Mayleen's hand in her small, mittened one. "Papa always says lost things should come home with us until we find where they belong," Clara announced. "You should come too." "Clara," a man's voice, deep and rough as creek stones. "Don't bother the lady." He emerged from the shadows of the station house, tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the same blue as his daughter's. But where Clara's held warmth, his were shuttered, guarded, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and decided to stop looking. Caleb Ward. Mayleen knew his name before he spoke it, recognized him from Clara's introduction. He wore work clothes, canvas pants, a sheepskin coat, boots caked with half-frozen mud. His hands, when he removed his hat, were scarred and calloused. Working hands. Honest hands. "Sorry," he said, his tone flat. "She gets ideas." "It's not idea, Papa," and Clara tugged on Mayleen's hand. "She's lost. We have to help." "Clara, You always say we help lost things." The child's voice carried the kind of logic that couldn't be argued with. "Remember when we found that baby bird, and the calf that wandered from the McGregor's place, and that dog with 3 legs? Caleb's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. His gaze moved from his daughter to Mayleen, and she saw the moment he registered her tear-stained face, her trembling hands, the carpet bag that held everything she owned. Recognition flickered, understanding, and then something harder, the look of a man who'd already given too much and had nothing left to spare. "That's different," he said quietly. "How?" Clara demanded. "Because—" He stopped, sighed, rubbed a hand over his face. "Because people ain't the same as animals, Clara." "But she's crying, Papa, and it's snowing, and she doesn't have anywhere to go." Clara's voice cracked on the last word. "Please?" The word hung in the frigid air between them. Mayleen wanted to refuse before Caleb could. She'd seen that look before. The calculation of burden versus conscience. She wouldn't be someone's obligation. "I'll manage," she said, forcing steel into her voice. "Thank you for your kindness, but there's a storm coming." Caleb spoke to the horizon rather than to her. "Temperature's dropping. You got somewhere to be?" Mayleen's silence was answer enough. Caleb looked at his daughter, at the hope shining in her young face, and Mayleen watched something in him crack, not break, but fracture along old lines that had barely healed. "One night," he said finally. "We got a spare room. You can stay till the storm passes, then figure out your next step." He met Mayleen's eyes. "But that's all I'm offering. A warm meal and a roof. Nothing more." Pride warred with desperation in Mayleen's chest. She'd crossed an ocean with nothing but her father's knowledge and her own determination. She'd survived rejection and shame and the gnawing ache of not belonging anywhere, but she'd never survived a Montana winter night with no shelter. "Thank you," she said softly. "I accept." Clara beamed like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Can you ride in the wagon with me? I can show you my doll. Her name is Rosie, but she lost an arm when Papa accidentally sat on her." "Clara." Caleb's tone carried a warning, but there was something gentle beneath it. "Let Miss Zhao get her things." The wagon was old but well-maintained, the horse a sturdy mare with patient eyes. Caleb loaded Maylene's carpet bag without comment, then lifted Clara into the wagon bed with practiced ease. He didn't offer to help Maylene up, perhaps sensing she'd refuse, but positioned himself so she could use his shoulder for balance if needed. She didn't touch him, climbed up on her own despite her frozen fingers and the awkward bulk of her skirts. He noticed but said nothing, just climbed into the driver's seat and clicked his tongue at the mare. The town fell away behind them as they headed into open country. Snow fell harder now, turning the world into shifting curtains of white. Maylene pulled her coat tighter and tried not to think about how far she'd come to end up in a stranger's wagon, riding toward a place she'd never seen, with no plan beyond surviving the night. Clara chattered beside her, oblivious to the tension radiating from her father's rigid shoulders. She talked about her doll, about the chickens they kept, about how Papa had promised her a kitten come spring if she learned her letters. "Can you read?" Clara asked suddenly. "Yes," Maylene said, "in 2 languages." Clara's eyes went wide. "2? Papa only knows 1. Well, and some Crow, but he says that's different." Maylene glanced at Caleb's back, saw his shoulders tense at the mention. Crow, the nation of the Northern Plains. Clara had said some Crow like it was a normal thing, not something that would raise eyebrows in most settlements. "My mama was Crow," Clara continued, following Maylene's gaze. "But she died last winter. Papa says she's with the stars now, but I think that's just a nice way of saying she ain't coming back." The casual devastation in those words made Maylene's chest ache. "I'm sorry." "It's okay. Papa says sorry a lot too, but it doesn't make her less gone." Clara leaned against Maylene's side, a small warmth in the bitter cold. "Do you have a mama?" "She died when I was young, younger than you." "Then you know." Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "About the hole it leaves." "Yes," Maylene whispered back. "I know." They rode in silence after that, punctuated only by the creak of wagon wheels and the whisper of falling snow. The landscape was vast and empty, broken only by the occasional stand of cottonwoods or the dark smudge of distant mountains. This was a hard land, Maylene realized, beautiful in its austerity, but unforgiving, like the man driving the wagon. The cabin appeared as darkness settled fully over the valley, a low structure of hewn logs with smoke rising from a stone chimney. A small barn stood nearby, and the whole place had the tidy, worn look of a property maintained by someone who couldn't afford hired help but refused to let things fall apart. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. "We're here." He lifted Clara down, then hesitated before offering Maylene his hand. She took it briefly, feeling the rough calluses against her palm, then released it the moment her feet touched solid ground. The cabin's interior was sparse but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with mismatched chairs, shelves holding tin plates and cups. 2 doors led to what Maylene assumed were bedrooms. The walls were bare except for a faded quilt hanging near the fire. Geometric patterns in red and cream that spoke of careful, patient work. "Clara's room is there." Caleb nodded toward one door. "You can take the other. It was—" He stopped, swallowed. "It's empty now. Should have clean sheets." "Thank you." He moved to the fireplace, adding wood with economical movements. "I'll heat some stew. Won't be fancy, but it's warm." "I can help." "No need." He didn't look at her. "You're a guest." The word felt wrong. Guests were invited, welcomed. Maylene was neither. She was an obligation taken on because a child had asked, because the alternative was leaving someone to freeze in a December storm. Clara tugged on Maylene's hand. "Want to see my room?" It was a small space, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a wooden chest, but the walls were painted a soft yellow, and someone had carved stars into the headboard. Careful, loving work that spoke of late nights and patient hands. "Papa made the stars," Clara said, following Maylene's gaze. "Mama said every child should sleep under stars, even inside." A lump formed in Maylene's throat. She knelt beside the chest where Clara was pulling out her doll, a rag creation with button eyes and, indeed, only one arm. "This is Rosie," Clara announced. "Mama made her. The arm came off when Papa sat on her, but Mama was already gone, so nobody could fix it right." Maylene took the doll carefully, examining the seam. "I might be able to reattach it, if you have the arm." Clara's face lit up. Really? Papa tried, but he's not good with sewing. His stitches come out all lumpy. I'll try, Maylene promised. But not tonight. Tomorrow, when there's better light. Stew's ready, Caleb's voice came from the main room. They ate in near silence. The stew was simple: venison, potatoes, onions, but after 3 weeks of train food, it tasted like a feast. Maylene ate slowly, savoring the warmth that spread through her chest with each bite. Thank you, she said when she finished, for the meal and the shelter. Caleb nodded but didn't meet her eyes. Storm should pass by tomorrow. You can head back to town then. Maybe wire someone for train fare. There was no one to wire, no one waiting, but Maylene didn't say that. Of course. Clara yawned, her eyelids drooping. Can Maylene read me a story, Papa? She's tired. I don't mind, Maylene interrupted. It was the least she could do. If you have a book. Caleb retrieved a worn copy of fairy tales from a shelf. Just one story, Clara, then bed. They settled on Clara's bed while Caleb cleared the table. Maylene read about a princess in a tower, a prince on a white horse, a happily ever after that seemed more fantasy than any dragon or magic spell. Clara's breathing evened out before the story ended, her small body relaxing into sleep. Maylene carefully extracted herself and returned to the main room. Caleb stood at the window, staring into the darkness. She's asleep, Maylene said quietly. Good. He didn't turn. Your room's got quilts in the chest. Should be warm enough. Mr. Ward. Just Caleb. Caleb, She took a breath. I want to thank you. What you did today. Taking in a stranger, that took a kind heart. Now he did turn, and the look in his eyes made her step back. Not anger, but something rawer, more painful. Don't mistake this for kindness, he said quietly. I did it because my daughter asked, and I can't seem to tell her no anymore. Not since... He stopped, shook his head. Just don't make more of this than it is. Come morning, you go back to town and figure out your next step. That's all. The words should have stung. Maybe they would have, if Maylene hadn't heard the grief beneath them. This was a man drowning in loss, keeping his head above water only for his daughter's sake. Taking in a stranger wasn't kindness. It was another weight he couldn't afford. I understand, she said. Good night, Caleb. She retreated to the small bedroom before he could respond. The room was indeed empty. No personal belongings, no signs of life. Just a bed, a chest, and walls that seemed to hold their breath. Maylene opened the chest and found quilts folded with precise care. She pulled one out, recognizing the same geometric pattern as the one hanging in the main room. Red and cream squares arranged in a pattern that looked random but wasn't. There was intention in every stitch, meaning in the placement. She spread it over the bed and sat down, her legs finally giving out. The day crashed over her in waves. The train platform, the cruel laughter, Clara's small hand in hers, Caleb's shuttered eyes. She'd come to Montana for a new beginning. Instead, she'd found another ending. But as she lay down beneath a dead woman's quilt in a stranger's house, listening to the wind howl outside and the soft crackle of the fire in the next room, Maylene made herself a promise. She would survive this, just as she'd survived her mother's death, her father's fever, her uncle's rejection. She would find a way forward. She always did. The storm broke in the night, not the weather, but something inside the cabin. Maylene woke to the sound of crying, high and frightened. Clara. She was on her feet before full consciousness returned, crossing the dark main room toward Clara's door. It stood open. Caleb was already there, sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed, holding her against his chest while she sobbed. Shh, baby, it was just a dream, just a dream. But she felt so real, Papa. She was here and then she wasn't, and I couldn't. Maylene should have retreated, should have given them privacy for their grief. But something kept her frozen in the doorway, watching this man rock his crying child, his own face twisted with helpless anguish. Clara's sobs gradually subsided into hiccups. Caleb murmured something too soft for Maylene to hear, then looked up and saw her standing there. Their eyes met in the darkness. Maylene saw everything he tried to hide, the exhaustion, the loneliness, The overwhelming weight of being the only parent left, of watching your child hurt and having no way to fix it. "I'm sorry," Maylene whispered. "I heard." "It's fine." His voice was rough. "She gets nightmares sometimes about her mama." "Can Maylin stay?" Clara's small voice muffled against her father's chest. "Please, I don't want to be alone." Caleb started to refuse. Maylene saw it forming on his lips, but then Clara clutched his shirt harder, and whatever wall he'd built crumbled a little more. "She's willing," he said quietly. Maylene crossed to the bed and sat on the other side. Clara immediately reached for her hand, gripping it like a lifeline. Together, they formed a strange trinity: the grieving widower, his heartbroken daughter, and the woman who'd arrived on a train with nowhere else to go. "Tell me about her," Maylene said softly. "Your mama." Clara's breathing hitched. "She was beautiful. She had black hair like yours, but longer, and she could ride horses better than anybody. Papa says she could track a rabbit through rock if she set her mind to it. She sounds remarkable." "She was." Caleb's voice held reverence. "Sarah was—" He stopped. Started again. "She was the strongest person I ever knew, right up until the fever took her." The grief in those words was so fresh it made Maylene's chest ache. She squeezed Clara's hand gently. "Would she want you to be sad?" "No," Clara whispered. "She said I should be brave, like her." "Then let's be brave together," Maylene said. "Just for tonight." Clara curled against her side, one hand holding Maylene's, the other clutching her father. Caleb met Maylene's eyes over his daughter's head, and something passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps recognition. Two people carrying grief they couldn't set down, bound together by a child who needed them both. Maylene stayed until Clara's breathing evened into sleep. Only then did she carefully extract her hand and rise to leave. "Wait." Caleb's voice stopped her at the door. "Thank you for that." She turned back. In the dim light from the dying fire, his face looked younger, more vulnerable. "She needed comfort. I was here. Most strangers wouldn't have stayed." "I'm not most strangers." The words came out sharper than intended. "I know what it's like to lose a mother, to have dreams where she's alive and wake up to emptiness." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "How old were you?" 8. Maylene wrapped her arms around herself. "My father did his best, but he was a healer, not a mother. Some nights I'd wake up crying and he'd just sit with me, not saying anything, just being there." "That's all we can do sometimes," Caleb said quietly. "Just be there." Silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither could say. Finally, Maylene nodded. "Good night, Caleb." "Night." She returned to her borrowed room, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she lay awake listening to the storm rage outside, thinking about the strange turns life took. 24 hours ago, she'd been on a train full of hope and fear. Now she was in a cabin that smelled of wood smoke and grief, sharing space with a man who didn't want her there, and a child who'd claimed her heart with a simple question. "Can you be my mommy forever?" The words echoed in the darkness. Absurd. Impossible. Clara had a mother, one who lived in memories and dreams, whose quilt still warmed the living, whose absence filled every corner of this cabin like smoke. But the question wouldn't leave Maylene alone, because beneath the absurdity was something else, a longing she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it existed, the desire to belong somewhere, to someone, to matter in a way that couldn't be erased by death or distance or the casual cruelty of strangers. Morning came gray and cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Maylene rose and dressed carefully, braiding her hair with fingers that knew every twist by heart. Today she would return to town, find work somehow, maybe as a laundress or cook, build a new life from nothing, the way she'd done before. The main room was empty when she emerged, but coffee steamed on the table and fresh biscuits sat wrapped in cloth. Caleb's work, she assumed, a simple kindness before she left. She was pouring coffee when the door burst open. Caleb stumbled in carrying Clara, her small face flushed fever bright, her body limp in his arms. "She's burning up," he said, and Maylene heard the edge of panic beneath his steady tone. "Just came on sudden this morning. She was fine last night." "Put her on the bed." Maylene was already moving, her mind shifting into the patterns her father had taught her. Now! He obeyed without question. Maylene pressed her hand to Clara's forehead and bit back a curse. The child was burning alive from within. How long has she been sick? Found her like this maybe 20 minutes ago. Caleb's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. I was checking the barn, and when I came back, she couldn't even stand. Get me cool water, clean cloths, and I need to see what herbs you have. We don't keep. Then I use what I brought. Maylene was already moving to her carpet bag, pulling out her father's journal and the small cloth pouches she'd carried across an ocean. Go, get the water. He went. Maylene bent over Clara, checking her pulse, her breathing, the way her eyes moved beneath closed lids. Fever? Yes, but coming on too fast. Something more than simple cold or influenza. Clara's eyes fluttered open. Maylene? I'm here, little one. You're going to be fine. Don't leave. The words were slurred. Promise. Maylene gripped the small, hot hand in hers. I promise. And in that moment, everything changed. The plan to return to town dissolved like morning mist. The careful walls Maylene had built around her heart cracked open. This child, this brave, bright girl who'd asked if Maylene could be her mother, needed her now. And Maylene would not fail her. Caleb returned with water and cloths. Maylene worked quickly, mixing herbs with the precision her father had drilled into her. Willow bark for the fever, echinacea to fight infection, ginger to settle the stomach. What are you doing? Caleb watched her hands move with practiced efficiency. Saving your daughter's life, Maylene said calmly. My father was a healer. He taught me everything he knew before he died. A healer? Something shifted in his face. Sarah's people had healers too. They used plants, ceremonies. This is different. Maylene crushed leaves between her fingers. But the principle is the same. The body knows how to heal itself. Sometimes it just needs help remembering. She worked through the morning, bathing Clara's burning skin with cool cloths, coaxing medicine past her lips, monitoring every breath and heartbeat. Caleb stayed nearby, helpless but unwilling to leave. You should rest, Maylene told him. I'll watch her. Can't. His jaw was tight. Already lost one person to fever in this house. I won't. I can't. The words broke off, but Maylene understood. She'd seen this before in her father's patients, the terror of watching someone you love slip away, unable to do anything but bear witness. Then help me, she said. Hold her hand, talk to her, let her know you're here. He moved to the other side of the bed and took his daughter's hand in both of his. His voice, when he spoke, was rough with emotion. Hey, baby girl. Papa's here. You're going to be just fine. Remember what Mama used to say? Ward women are made of thunder and lightning. You've got thunder in you, Clara. You just got to let it roll. Maylene worked and Caleb kept vigil, and between them they held Clara to this world through sheer force of will. Hours blurred together. The fever raged. Clara's breathing grew shallow, then steadied, then weakened again. As afternoon light slanted through the window, Maylene prepared her strongest medicine, a tea made from herbs that had saved lives in Guangdong when Western medicine failed. Her father's secret recipe, passed down through generations. This might hurt, she warned Caleb, but it's her best chance. He nodded, trust replacing doubt in his eyes. Do it. Maylene lifted Clara's head and coaxed the bitter liquid past her lips. The child coughed, tried to turn away, but Maylene persisted. Drink, Clara, please, for me. Maybe it was the medicine. Maybe it was the steady presence of two people refusing to let her go. Maybe it was simply Clara's own fierce will, that thunder her mother had spoken of. Whatever the reason, as evening approached, the fever broke. Clara's eyes opened clear for the first time since morning. Papa? Caleb made a sound between a laugh and a sob. Right here, baby. I'm thirsty. Maylene brought water, supporting Clara's head while she drank. The child's gaze found hers. You stayed. I promised. Mama would have liked you, Clara whispered, then drifted into real sleep. Not the feverish unconsciousness of before, but genuine rest. Caleb remained frozen, his daughter's hand still clasped in his. Maylene saw the moment the fear drained out of him, leaving exhaustion in its wake. His shoulders sagged, his head bowed. Thank you, he said, and his voice broke on the words. Thank you. Maylene wanted to comfort him, to offer words that would ease the terror he'd just endured. But her own hands were shaking now, adrenaline fading to leave her hollow. She's strong, Maylene managed, like her mother. Caleb looked up, and the walls he'd kept so carefully in place were gone. She saw everything, the grief, the fear, the overwhelming relief. You saved her life. I did what my father taught me. No. He stood, crossing to where she sat. You did more than that. You could have left this morning, gone back to town like we agreed. But you didn't. You stayed, and you fought for her like she was your own. The words hung in the air between them. Maylene's throat tightened. She asked me not to leave. And you kept your promise. Caleb's voice was rough. That means something. Night had fallen completely now. The fire burned low in the main room. Clara slept peacefully in her bed. The crisis passed, and two strangers stood in the small cabin, bound together by a child they'd refused to let go. I should check on her through the night, Maylene said. Make sure the fever doesn't return. I'll help. Caleb moved back to Clara's bedside. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. So they kept watch together, trading shifts through the long hours. When Caleb dozed in his chair, Maylene monitored Clara's breathing, her temperature, the color returning to her cheeks. When Maylene's eyes grew heavy, Caleb took over, his large hands gentle as he adjusted blankets and checked his daughter's forehead. Around midnight, Clara woke briefly. She looked from her father to Maylene and back again, then smiled, a small, tired expression that held surprising contentment. Like a real family, she murmured, then drifted back to sleep. The words settled over the room like fresh snow. Maylene met Caleb's eyes across the bed and saw her own uncertainty reflected there. What were they doing? Playing house with a stranger's child? Pretending it's something neither of them could afford to want? But Clara's breathing was steady, her fever gone, and in that moment nothing else seemed to matter. Dawn came soft and pink. Clara woke truly hungry for the first time in a day, demanding biscuits and honey. Caleb laughed, actually laughed, and the sound transformed his face, making him look years younger. Maylene prepared a simple breakfast while Clara chattered about her dreams. Normal dreams this time, not nightmares. Dreams about kittens and spring flowers and teaching her new friend Maylene how to feed the chickens. If she stays, Clara added, looking between her father and Maylene with hopeful eyes. The question neither of them had addressed sat heavy in the morning light. Caleb cleared his throat. Clara, I know what we said, the child interrupted. But Papa, Maylene saved my life. Don't that change things? Doesn't, Caleb corrected automatically. And it ain't that simple. Why not? Clara's logic was relentless. She don't have nowhere to go. We got an extra room. She knows medicine and fixing things, and she promised to fix Rosie's arm. Plus, she took a breath. Plus, I like her. A lot. And I think you do too, even if you don't want to say it. Caleb's ears went red. Clara Grace Ward, it's true. Clara crossed her arms. I see how you look at her when you think nobody's watching, like maybe you remember how to smile. Maylene wanted to disappear through the floor. This was mortifying. The child meant well, but I should go, she said quickly. The storm's passed. I can make it back to town. No. Clara's voice cracked. Please don't go. Not yet. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. Clara, Miss Zhao has her own life to live. She can't just stay here because you ask. But what if I'm sick again? What if I need medicine? The town's got a doctor. Who couldn't save Mama? Clara said quietly. The words fell like stones into still water. Caleb flinched. Maylene's chest tightened with sympathy for them both. The child grappling with loss, the father trying to protect her from more. That wasn't the doctor's fault, Caleb said gently. Your mama had a sickness that couldn't be fixed, not by any medicine. But Maylene fixed me. That was different. Caleb looked at Maylene helplessly. Tell her she can't expect. I could stay, Maylene heard herself say. Both wards stared at her. She stared back, surprised by her own words. But once spoken, they felt right. True. Just for a while, she continued. Until Claire's fully recovered, and until I can figure out my next step. She met Caleb's eyes. If that's acceptable to you, He studied her for a long moment. She saw the war playing out behind his eyes, caution versus need, grief versus hope. The part of him that wanted to say no, to keep his heart locked away, and the part that recognized what his daughter desperately needed. "You'd need paying," he said finally. "I can't offer much, but room and board is enough." Maylene lifted her chin. "I'm not here for money." "Then what are you here for?" The question was fair, honest, and Maylene gave him the same in return. "Because I have nowhere else to go, and because your daughter asked, and because—" She paused, searching for truth. "Because maybe I can help. For a little while. Until you don't need me anymore." The last words came out smaller than she intended, more vulnerable. But they were real, and Caleb seemed to recognize that. He nodded slowly. "All right, you can stay. Temporarily." Clara whooped and threw her arms around Maylene's waist. "I knew it. I knew you'd stay." Maylene met Caleb's eyes over his daughter's head. She saw wariness there, and worry, but also something that might have been relief. They'd both been alone too long, she realized, both carrying grief that weighed more than any person should have to bear. Maybe they couldn't fix each other's pain, but maybe, for a while, they could share the burden. It wasn't forever. It wasn't even a plan. But it was something, and for now, that was enough. The days that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm. Maylene woke each morning to the sound of Caleb splitting wood outside, the steady thunk of axe against timber marking time like a heartbeat. She'd dress quickly in the cold room, then emerge to find coffee already brewing and Clara sitting at the table, swinging her legs and chattering about her dreams. "I dreamed about spring," Clara announced on the third morning. "There were flowers everywhere and you were teaching me their names in Chinese." "Were there now?" Maylene poured coffee, careful to keep her tone light. The child's dreams had shifted from nightmares to fantasies, which felt like progress but also danger. Clara was building a world in her mind where Maylene stayed forever, and each day that passed made that imaginary future feel more real. "Uh-huh." And Papa was smiling, really smiling, not the sad kind he does when he thinks I'm not looking. Maylene glanced toward the window where Caleb was stacking split logs with methodical precision. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he moved like a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. "Your papa smiles more than you think," Maylene said quietly. "Not like he used to." Clara picked at her biscuit. "Before Mama got sick, he used to laugh all the time. They both did. Sometimes I'd wake up and hear them in the kitchen, talking quiet and laughing about things I didn't understand." The longing in Clara's voice made Maylene's chest ache. She sat down beside the child and took her small hand. People who lose someone they love, sometimes it takes a long time before they remember how to laugh again. "How long did it take you? After your mama died?" The question caught Maylene off guard. She thought back to those years after her mother's death, the gray fog that had settled over everything, making even simple joys feel muted and distant. "A very long time," she admitted. "Too long, maybe. But you remember how now, right? I heard you laugh yesterday when the chickens got out and Papa had to chase them." Maylene smiled despite herself. Caleb had indeed spent 20 minutes trying to corral 3 determined hens while cursing under his breath. The sight of this serious, controlled man being outsmarted by poultry had been absurdly funny. "Yes, I remember how." "Then maybe you can help Papa remember too." Before Maylene could respond, the door opened and Caleb entered on a gust of cold air. Snow dusted his hair and shoulders. He paused when he saw them sitting together, something unreadable crossing his face. "Morning," he said gruffly. "Morning, Papa. Maylene and I were talking about laughing." His eyebrows rose. "That's so." "She says it takes a long time to remember how after someone dies. But she remembered, so maybe you can too." The words hung in the air like frost. Caleb's jaw tightened, and for a moment Maylene thought he might retreat back outside. Instead, he crossed to the coffee pot and poured himself a cup with steady hands. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Someday." It wasn't much, but it was more than dismissal. Clara beamed like he'd promised her the moon. After breakfast, Maylene kept her promise to repair Rosie's missing arm. Clara produced the detached limb from her treasure box. A sad little tube of fabric with stuffing leaking out. Maylene examined it carefully, then retrieved her sewing kit from her carpet bag. "Can I watch?" Clara settled beside her on the floor near the fire. "Of course. You might learn something useful." Caleb worked at this table, mending a broken harness strap, but Maylene felt his attention drift toward them periodically. She threaded her needle with steady hands and began reattaching the arm with small, precise stitches. "My mama taught me to sew," Clara said softly. "But I wasn't very good at it. My fingers are too clumsy." "You're 6, Maylene reminded her. "When I was 6, I stabbed myself so many times my father threatened to ban needles from the house." Clara giggled. "Really? Really? He said I was shedding more blood than a battlefield surgeon's tent." Maylene tied off a stitch. "But I kept practicing, and eventually my fingers learned what to do." "What else did your papa teach you?" "Everything." The word came out more raw than Maylene intended. She focused on her stitches, keeping her voice steady. How to read and write in 2 languages. How to identify medicinal plants. How to take a pulse and recognize fever patterns. How to listen to what the body was trying to say. He sounds smart. He was brilliant and kind. He never turned anyone away, even when they couldn't pay. Maylene's throat tightened. He used to say that healing wasn't about money. It was about recognizing that every life had value, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. She felt rather than saw Caleb's attention sharpen. When she glanced up, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Your father sounds like a good man," he said. "He was the best man I ever knew." Maylene returned to her sewing. "He died trying to save others during a fever outbreak in our district. Caught the sickness himself, and by the time I realized how bad it was, there was nothing I could do except hold his hand and tell him I loved him." The admission came out before she could stop it. She'd never told anyone that story, not in its entirety, but something about this quiet cabin and these 2 people made the words feel safe. "I'm sorry," Caleb said, and the genuine sympathy in his voice made her eyes sting. "Me too." She tied off the final stitch and held up the doll. "There. Good as new." Clara took Rosie reverently, examining the reattached arm with wonder. "It's perfect. Thank you, Maylene." "You're welcome, little one." Clara hugged the doll tight, then looked up at Maylene with serious eyes. "Do you think your papa would be proud of you for saving me?" The question drove straight into Maylene's heart. She thought about her father, about his fierce belief in the value of every life, about the way he'd taught her to see healing as a calling rather than a job. "Yes," she whispered. "I think he would." That afternoon, Caleb announced he needed to ride into town for supplies. Clara immediately asked to come, but he shook his head. "Too cold, and you're still recovering. You stay here with Miss Zhao." "Maylene," she corrected without thinking. "Please, just Maylene." Their eyes met. Something shifted in his expression, a softening she hadn't seen before. "Maylene, then." He tested the name like tasting something unfamiliar. "I'll be back before dark. You 2 keep the fire going and stay inside." After he left, Clara pulled Maylene into a serious conversation about what they should make for dinner. The child had opinions, strong ones, about the proper ratio of carrots to potatoes in stew. "Mama always said you can't have too many carrots," Clara explained, "but Papa thinks they're just decoration. He always picks them out when he thinks I'm not watching." "Does he now?" Maylene smiled. "What else does your papa do when he thinks you're not watching?" Clara's face grew thoughtful. "Sometimes he goes outside late at night and just stands there looking at the stars. And sometimes I hear him talking, real quiet, like he's talking to someone who's not there. And once I found him holding Mama's sewing basket and crying, but when he saw me, he pretended he had dust in his eye." The image of Caleb, stoic, controlled Caleb, weeping over his dead wife's belongings, made Maylene's throat close. She pulled Clara into a gentle hug. "Your papa loved your mama very much," she said softly. "That kind of love doesn't just disappear when someone dies. It stays, even when it hurts. Do you think he'll ever love anyone else?" The question was so earnest, so hopeful, that Maylene couldn't brush it aside. "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes people's hearts are too full of missing someone to make room for new feelings. And that's okay. It doesn't mean they're broken. It just means they loved deeply." Clara absorbed this, then asked with devastating casualness, "Do you think you'll ever get married?" Maylene nearly choked. That's not something I've thought much about. Why not? You're pretty and smart, and you can fix almost anything. Marriage isn't about fixing things. Maylene chose her words carefully. It's about finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and chooses you anyway. All your broken pieces and sharp edges and strange ways, that's rare. Papa saw Mama that way, Clara said. She told me once that everybody else looked at her and saw that Indian woman, but Papa just saw Sarah, the person, not the label. Maylene's heart squeezed. She understood that feeling of being reduced to what others saw rather than who you were. Your papa sounds like he was a good husband. He is, Clara frowned. I don't know what word to use. He's still married in his head, even though Mama's gone. The child's insight was unnervingly accurate. Maylene had seen it herself. The way Caleb moved through the cabin, like a man still sharing space with someone, still considering another person's preferences and routines. He wasn't a widower who'd moved on. He was a husband waiting for his wife to come home. They spent the afternoon preparing stew, heavy on carrots, per Clara's specifications, and baking bread. Maylene taught Clara a song her father used to sing while cooking, a simple melody in Cantonese about rain and rice fields. The child picked it up quickly, humming along even when she couldn't form the words. When Caleb returned just before sunset, he stopped in the doorway and stared. Clara stood on a stool at the table, kneading dough with floury hands while Maylene guided her movements and sang softly in Chinese. The firelight caught them both, making the scene look like something from a dream. Papa, Clara waved, sending a cloud of flour into the air. We made dinner and bread, and Maylene taught me a song. He set down his supplies carefully, his expression unreadable. I can see that. Do you like carrots? Clara asked with exaggerated innocence. Because there's lots in the stew. The corner of his mouth twitched. I can tolerate them. Liar, you hate them. Clara Grace, but you'll eat them anyway, because Maylene worked hard, and it would be rude not to. Clara grinned, pleased with her logic. Caleb looked at Maylene helplessly. She fought back a smile. She's not wrong. Ganged up on in my own house, he muttered, but there was no heat in it. Fine. I'll eat the damn carrots. Language, Papa. Over dinner, Caleb shared news from town, mostly mundane things about who was feuding with whom and which businesses were struggling through winter. But then his expression darkened. Ran into Tommy Briggs at the general store, he said quietly, his eyes flicking to Maylene. The boy who forged that letter. Maylene's hand tightened on her spoon. Oh? Told him if he ever pulled a stunt like that again, I'd make sure his father knew exactly what kind of son he raised. Caleb's jaw was tight. Kid's an idiot, but he seemed genuinely sorry. Said he didn't think anyone would actually come all that way for a fake letter. People will travel any distance for hope, Maylene said softly. Even false hope. Their eyes met across the table. Caleb looked like he wanted to say something more, but Clara interrupted with a question about whether they could get chickens that laid blue eggs, and the moment passed. That night, after Clara was asleep, Maylene sat by the fire working on a new project, embroidering a handkerchief with delicate flowers. Her father had taught her the stitches, saying skilled hands should never be idle. Caleb emerged from checking on Clara and paused when he saw what Maylene was doing. That's fine work. Thank you. My father believed in keeping hands busy and mind quiet. She tied off a thread. He said most problems solve themselves if you give them time and don't force solutions. Wise man. Caleb settled into the chair across from her, holding a cup of coffee he didn't seem interested in drinking. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really agree to stay? Not the official reason you gave Clara, the real one. Maylene's hands stilled. The question was fair, but the answer was complicated. Because I was tired, she said finally. Tired of moving. Tired of not belonging. Tired of being the person everyone looks past rather than at. She met his eyes. Your daughter sees me. Really sees me. Not as Chinese or foreign or strange, just as a person who might matter. That's rare. Clara has a gift for that, Caleb said quietly. Seeing people for who they are. She got it from her mother. Tell me about Sarah. The words came out before Maylene could reconsider. If you want to. He was quiet for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then he set down his coffee and leaned back, his eyes distant with memory. Met her 7 years ago. I was working as a ranch hand for the McGregors, and she was there trading furs with her cousin. Spotted her across the yard and couldn't look away. A small smile touched his lips. She caught me staring and asked if I had a problem with Indian women. I said no, just with beautiful women who made me forget my own name. Smooth, Maylene observed. She laughed at me, said white men were all the same, full of pretty words and empty promises. His smile faded. So I spent the next 3 months proving her wrong. Learned some Crow, showed up at her family's camp with gifts, even though her brothers looked ready to shoot me. Sat through ceremonies I didn't understand and meals where I was clearly not welcome. But you kept coming back, every week, rain or shine or snow, because Sarah was worth it. His voice roughened. Eventually her family saw I was serious, that I didn't care what color her skin was or what language she spoke. I just wanted to spend my life making her happy. Did you? Make her happy? I tried. Got this land, built this cabin. We had Clara, and Sarah said she'd never felt more complete. He rubbed a hand over his face. Then the fever came. Took her in 5 days. The doctor said there was nothing to be done, that her body just gave up fighting. Maylene heard the guilt beneath his words, the terrible what-ifs that haunted anyone who'd lost someone to sickness. It wasn't your fault? I know that. In my head, I know. But my heart keeps asking why I couldn't save her. Why I had to just stand there and watch her slip away. Because some things are beyond our control, Maylene said gently. The fever that took my father, I tried everything I knew. Every remedy, every technique. Nothing worked. For years I blamed myself, thought if I'd been better, smarter, faster, I could have saved him. She paused. But grief isn't logical. It just is. Caleb studied her face in the firelight. How did you get past it? I'm not sure I have. I just learned to carry it differently. Maylene returned to her embroidery. The weight doesn't get lighter, you just get stronger. They sat in companionable silence after that. The only sounds, the crackle of fire, and the whisper of thread through fabric. It felt strange and right all at once, this quiet sharing of space with someone who understood loss in the same wordless way. Eventually Caleb stood. I should sleep. Long day tomorrow. Got fences to mend before the next storm hits. Good night, Caleb. He paused at his bedroom door. Thank you for listening and for being here. Where else would I be? Maylene meant it lightly, but the words came out more serious than intended. Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability breaking through his careful control. I don't know, but I'm glad you're not there. The days blurred together after that, each one building on the last. Maylene fell into the rhythms of ranch life, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, helping Clara with her letters, preparing meals, mending clothes. Small tasks that added up to something that almost felt like belonging. Clara thrived under the attention, her health fully restored and her spirits high. She followed Maylene everywhere, asking endless questions about China, about healing, about everything under the sun. Maylene answered patiently, touched by the child's genuine curiosity. Caleb remained cautious but less guarded. He spoke more at meals, shared small details about his day, sometimes even smiled at Clara's antics. Once Maylene caught him watching her teach Clara to write Chinese characters, his expression soft in a way that made her heart stutter. But she reminded herself constantly, this was temporary. A pause, not a destination. Eventually she'd need to move on, find real work, build an actual life rather than borrowing someone else's. 2 weeks after her arrival, a storm rolled in that made the first one look gentle. Wind screamed around the cabin, driving snow horizontally. Caleb spent hours reinforcing the barn and moving the animals to shelter, while Maylene kept Clara occupied inside. When he finally returned, he was ice-covered and exhausted. Maylene had hot water ready and insisted he warm himself by the fire. Stubborn man, she muttered, helping him out of his frozen coat. You'll catch your death. Had to make sure the stock was safe. His teeth chattered. Lost animals last winter. Can't afford to lose more. And Clara can't afford to lose you. Maylene pushed a cup of hot tea into his hands. Drink. He obeyed, too tired to argue. Clara curled up beside him, and Maylene brought blankets, wrapping them around father and daughter until they looked like a cocoon. Tell us a story, Maylene, Clara requested, about China. So Maylene told them about the village where she'd grown up, the rice fields that turned gold in autumn, the festivals with dragon dances and fireworks, the way her father's patients would pay with vegetables or eggs, or sometimes just gratitude. She painted the scene with words, making them see the place she'd left behind. Sounds beautiful, Clara said sleepily. Why did you leave? The question was innocent, but it cut deep. Maylene met Caleb's eyes over Clara's head and saw understanding there. He knew about leaving, about places that couldn't be home anymore. Sometimes you have to leave beautiful things behind, she said quietly. Not because you want to, but because staying would hurt more. Caleb nodded slightly. He got it. That particular kind of grief. The storm lasted 3 days. They were trapped inside together, learning each other's routines and quirks. Maylene discovered Caleb was terrible at cards but excellent at chess. He learned she could cook almost anything but burned bread with alarming consistency. Clara observed it all with the satisfied expression of someone watching a plan unfold. On the third night, after Clara was asleep, Caleb found Maylene at the window watching snow fall. Penny for your thoughts, he offered. I was thinking about permanence, she admitted. How nothing really lasts. Not places or people or promises. Everything's temporary. We just pretend otherwise to feel safe. That's a dark view of the world. Is it wrong? He considered. Maybe not wrong, but maybe not complete either. Some things do last, just not in the ways we expect. Sarah's been gone over a year, but she's still here in every corner of this cabin. In Clara's laugh, in the quilt on your bed that Sarah made while pregnant. In the way I still set 3 plates at dinner sometimes before I remember. Maylene's throat tightened. That sounds painful. It is, but it's also proof that love doesn't end just because life does. He moved to stand beside her at the window. Maybe permanence isn't about things lasting forever. Maybe it's about them mattering while they're here. She looked up at him, struck by the quiet wisdom in his words. When did you get so philosophical? Long winter nights with nothing but thoughts for company. A hint of smile touched his mouth. Makes a man either wise or crazy, sometimes both. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching snow transform the world into something clean and new. Maylene felt the warmth of him beside her, solid and real. It would be so easy to lean into that warmth, to let herself imagine this could be more than temporary. But she'd learned young not to trust easy things. I should check on Clara, she said, stepping back. Make sure she's still covered. If Caleb was disappointed, he hid it well. Sleep well, Maylene. You too. But sleep didn't come easily that night. Maylene lay beneath Sarah's quilt, staring at the ceiling and trying to untangle the knot of feelings in her chest. She'd only been here 3 weeks, but already this place felt more like home than anywhere since her father's death. That terrified her. Because Clara was wrong about one thing. Maylene wasn't staying. Couldn't stay. She was a temporary solution to a permanent problem, and eventually Caleb would realize that. Would see her the way everyone else did, as something foreign, something that didn't quite fit. Better to leave before she was asked to, before the inevitable rejection came. She fell asleep planning her departure and woke to Clara's screams. Maylene was running before she was fully conscious, bursting into Clara's room to find the child tangled in blankets, sobbing with pure terror. Caleb was already there trying to calm her. She won't wake up, he said urgently. She's caught in it. Maylene knelt beside the bed and took Clara's face in her hands. Clara, sweetheart, wake up. You're safe. You're home. The child's eyes flew open, unfocused and wild. The ice! I can't get out. It's so cold. You're not in ice. You're in your bed, with your papa and me right here. Maylene kept her voice calm and steady. Feel the blankets? Feel how warm they are? Slowly, awareness returned to Clara's eyes. She looked from Maylene to her father and back, then burst into fresh tears. I dreamed I fell through the ice and nobody could find me, and I was so cold and scared and alone. Caleb gathered her close. Just a dream, baby. You're safe. But Clara reached for Maylene too, pulling her into the embrace until the three of them were huddled together on the small bed. "Don't let me go," Clara whispered. "Either of you, please don't let go." "We won't," Maylene promised, even as her heart broke a little. "We're right here." They stayed that way until Clara's breathing evened and she drifted back to sleep. Only then did Caleb and Maylene carefully extract themselves, moving to the main room so their voices wouldn't wake her. "She's been having more nightmares," Caleb admitted, running both hands through his hair. "I thought they were getting better, but sometimes healing isn't linear," Maylene said gently, "especially with grief. She takes 2 steps forward, 1 step back." "I don't know how to help her." The confession came out raw. "I'm her father. I'm supposed to make things better, but I can't bring her mother back. Can't make the bad dreams stop. Can't—" His voice cracked. "Can't fix this." Maylene moved without thinking, reaching for his hand. He gripped it like a lifeline. "You can't fix it," she agreed. "But you can be there. You can hold her when she cries, tell her she's safe, remind her she's loved. That's not nothing, Caleb. That's everything." He looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. In the dim light, his eyes held something vulnerable and searching. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I don't. I just say what I wish someone had said to me." She squeezed his hand gently. "We're all just making it up as we go, trying not to break the people we love any worse than they're already broken." "Is that what this is?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Love?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility and danger. Maylene's heart hammered against her ribs. She should pull back, should remind him this was temporary, that she was leaving, that they barely knew each other. But his hand was warm in hers, and his eyes held hope she didn't want to extinguish. "I don't know," she whispered back. "What do you think it is?" "I think—" He stopped, started again. "I think you've become important. To Clara. To this house. To—" He swallowed hard. "To me." The admission cost him. Maylene saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers trembled slightly in hers. This was a man who'd locked his heart away after loss, and opening it again meant risking that pain all over. "Caleb, I know what you're going to say." He released her hand and stepped back. "That this is complicated. That you're only here temporarily. That I'm still grieving Sarah and you're just trying to figure out your next move and Claire's confused and this is all moving too fast." "Is that what you think I was going to say?" "Wasn't it?" Maylene studied his face, the defensive set of his shoulders, the way he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. He was protecting himself, building walls before she could reject him. "No," she said softly. "I was going to say that you terrify me." His eyes snapped to hers. "What?" "You and Clara. This whole situation. It terrifies me." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Because I could fall in love with this. With her. With you. With the life I'm pretending to live here. And when it ends, because it will end, it's going to break something in me I'm not sure I can fix." Silence stretched between them, heavy with truth neither had meant to speak aloud. "Who says it has to end?" Caleb's voice was rough. "Don't." Maylene shook her head. "Don't offer me something you can't sustain. I've lived on false promises before. I won't do it again." "This isn't false." He moved closer. "You saved my daughter's life. You've brought light back into this house. You've made me remember what it feels like to want more than just survival." "Today," Maylene countered. "But what about tomorrow? Next week? Next month? When Clara's nightmares fade and you don't need someone to help anymore? When you remember I'm not Sarah and never will be?" "I don't want you to be Sarah." The words came out fierce. "I want you to be you, sharp and strong and honest. Someone who doesn't pretend things don't hurt. Someone who sees broken things and doesn't run away." Maylene's eyes stung. "You don't know me well enough to want that." "Maybe not, but I know enough to want to learn more." He reached for her hand again, gentler this time. "Stay, Maylene. Not as temporary help, not as a guest, just stay. Help me raise Clara, build something here. See where this goes." It was everything she dreamed of and everything she feared. A home, a family, a chance to belong. and all she had to do was trust it wouldn't disappear. "I can't promise I won't hurt you," she whispered. "I can't promise that either." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "But maybe we can figure it out together." She wanted to say yes. Wanted it so badly her chest ached with it. But old fears had deep roots. "Let me think about it," she managed. "Please." Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "Take all the time you need." He released her hand and returned to his room, leaving Maylene alone with choices she didn't know how to make. Morning came too bright and too soon. Maylene woke to find Clara already in the kitchen, humming the Chinese song while attempting to crack eggs into a bowl. 3 shells floated in the mixture and yolk dripped down the cabinet, but the child's expression was pure concentration. "Good morning," Maylene said softly, not wanting to startle her. Clara jumped anyway, sending another egg rolling across the counter. "I wanted to make breakfast to surprise you and Papa, but the eggs won't cooperate." Maylene surveyed the damage with practiced calm. "Eggs can be tricky. Here, let me show you a technique my father taught me." She demonstrated how to crack an egg cleanly on a flat surface rather than the bowl's edge, how to use 2 hands to separate the shell, how to fish out errant pieces without making a bigger mess. Clara watched with fierce attention, then tried again. This time, the egg landed perfectly in the bowl. "I did it!" Clara's face glowed with triumph. "You did! Now 6 more, and we'll have enough for everyone." They worked side by side in comfortable rhythm. Maylene became aware of Caleb watching from his bedroom doorway, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly and something passed between them. Acknowledgement of last night's conversation, the question still hanging unanswered in the air. "Papa, I'm making eggs," Clara announced without looking up. "Maylene taught me the secret." "I can see that." Caleb moved to the coffee pot, his movements careful, like a man navigating uncertain ground. "Smells good." The morning proceeded with forced normalcy. They ate Clara's eggs, slightly rubbery but edible, and discussed plans for the day. Caleb needed to check the far fence line. Clara wanted to practice her letters. Nobody mentioned what had been said in the darkness. But it sat there anyway, a presence at the table with them. After breakfast, Caleb prepared to leave. He was pulling on his coat when Clara suddenly threw her arms around his waist. "Be careful, Papa. Please be careful." The intensity in her voice made both adults pause. Caleb knelt to her level, his big hands gentle on her small shoulders. "Always am, sweetheart. What's got you worried?" "I don't know." Clara's eyes welled up. "I just have a bad feeling, like something's going to happen." "Nothing's going to happen," Caleb assured her. "I'm just riding out to check fences, then coming right back. Same as always." But Clara wouldn't release him. "Promise? Promise you'll come back?" "I promise." He kissed her forehead. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." Maylene watched this exchange with growing unease. Children sometimes sensed things adults missed. Her father had believed that deeply. He'd told her once about a child who'd refused to let his mother leave for market, crying inconsolably until she stayed. An hour later, the bridge she would have crossed collapsed. "Maybe wait," Maylene found herself saying. "Just an hour or 2. Until Clara feels better." Caleb's eyes met hers over Clara's head. She saw him weighing her words, considering, but then he shook his head. "Storm's coming tomorrow. Fence won't wait." He stood, ruffling Clara's hair. "I'll be fine. You two keep each other company." He left before either could argue further. Clara stood at the window watching until he disappeared over the rise, her small face pressed against the cold glass. "He'll be all right," Maylene said, trying to convince herself as much as the child. "You don't know that." Clara's voice was flat. "Nobody knows that. Mama went to trade at the McGregors and came back with fever. One day she was fine, the next she was dying. Nothing's certain." The bleak wisdom in those words chilled Maylene more than the winter wind. This was what loss did to children. Taught them too young that safety was an illusion, that the people you loved could vanish between one breath and the next. "No," Maylene agreed quietly. "Nothing's certain, but your papa is strong and careful and he knows this land. We have to trust that." Trusting doesn't make things true. Clara turned from the window, her eyes too old for her young face. "But I'll try anyway, because what else can I do?" They spent the morning on letters and numbers, but Clara's attention kept drifting to the window. Maylene finally abandoned the lesson and suggested they bake bread instead, something that required enough focus to keep worry at bay. They were elbow deep in dough when Clara asked, "Are you going to stay?" Maylene's hands stilled. "What makes you ask that?" "I heard you and Papa last night. Not the words, but the sound. He was asking you something important and you didn't say yes." Clara punched the dough with more force than necessary. "Everybody leaves eventually. Mama didn't want to, but she did anyway. And you will too." "Clara, it's okay." The child's voice cracked. "I know you have your own life, your own plans. I just thought maybe—" She trailed off, blinking hard against tears. "Maybe this time would be different." Maylene's heart fractured. She abandoned her dough and knelt beside Clara, taking the small flour-dusted hands in hers. "Listen to me. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's right or smart or safe, but I do know this. Whatever I decide, it won't be because I don't care about you. You understand? You matter to me, Clara Ward. You matter so much it scares me." "Then why won't you stay?" The question was barely a whisper. "Because staying means trusting this is real, that it won't disappear, that I won't wake up one day and find it was all temporary after all." Maylene brushed a tear from Clara's cheek. "I've lost everyone I ever loved. My mother, my father, my home, my country. I don't know if I can survive losing you and your papa too." "So you'll leave first? Before we can leave you?" The accuracy of that statement stole Maylene's breath. Yes, that was exactly what she was doing, protecting herself by running before the inevitable rejection came. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "of wanting something this much, of letting myself believe I could belong here." Clara studied her with those unsettling blue eyes that saw too much. "Mama used to say being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing things even when you are scared, because the thing you're doing matters more than the fear." Your mama was very wise. "She was." Clara squeezed Maylene's hands. "And she would have liked you. I know she would have. She always said the best people are the ones who've been broken and put themselves back together. She said broken people understand how to be gentle with other broken people." Maylene pulled Clara into a tight embrace, this child who'd somehow wormed past every defense Maylene had built. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just haven't been listening." Clara's voice was muffled against Maylene's shoulder. "Will you at least think about it? Really think about it?" "I will. I promise." They finished the bread in silence, but it was a companionable quiet rather than strained. Something had shifted between them, an understanding reached, an honesty established. The bread was cooling on the rack when the first snowflakes began to fall. Clara ran to the window, her earlier worry resurfacing. "Papa said the storm wasn't coming until tomorrow." Maylene joined her at the window. The sky had darkened ominously, heavy clouds rolling in faster than seemed natural. Wind began to howl around the cabin's corners, and the temperature dropped so quickly she could feel it through the glass. "Sometimes weather changes," she said, trying to sound calm. "He'll see the storm coming and head back early." But the snow fell harder, thicker, until visibility disappeared into white. An hour passed, then 2. Clara grew increasingly agitated, pacing between window and door like a caged animal. "Something's wrong. I know something's wrong. Your papa knows these lands better than anyone, but what if his horse threw him? What if he's hurt? What if he's lost and can't find his way back in the storm?" Clara's voice rose with each question, panic taking hold. Maylene tried to soothe her, but her own worry grew with each passing minute. Caleb should have been back by now, should have seen the storm coming and turned around. Unless something had delayed him, unless Clara's bad feeling had been right all along. By late afternoon, with no sign of Caleb and the storm raging like nothing Maylene had ever seen, she had to face facts. He was in trouble. "I'm going to look for him," she announced, already moving toward her coat. "No." Clara grabbed her arm. "You can't. You'll get lost too, and then I'll be alone, and listen to me." Maylene knelt, taking Clara's face in her hands. "Your papa needs help. I can't just sit here knowing that. But I need you to be brave. Can you do that?" "I don't want to be brave. I want Papa to come home." "I know, sweetheart, I know. But sometimes we don't get what we want. We get what we can survive. And you can survive this." Maylene pressed their foreheads together. I will find him. I will bring him home, I promise you. You can't promise that. Claire's tears came hot and fast. Nobody can promise that. Watch me. Maylene stood and began gathering supplies. Rope, blankets, matches, the hunting knife she'd seen Caleb use for cutting kindling. She had no plan, no real idea how to find one man in a Montana blizzard, but she couldn't stay here doing nothing while he froze to death. What do I do? Claire's voice was small and terrified. Keep the fire going. Don't open the door for anyone but me or your papa. If we're not back by morning... Maylene stopped. She couldn't say that. Couldn't plant that fear. We'll be back before then, but if something happens, there's food enough for days and wood stacked inside. You're smart and strong. You'll be all right. She pulled Clara into one more fierce embrace, then forced herself to let go. At the door, she paused and looked back. Clara stood in the firelight, looking impossibly small and fragile. I love you, Maylene said. The words came out without thought, but they were true. Somewhere in the past few weeks, this child had claimed a piece of her heart Maylene hadn't known was available. Remember that, whatever happens. I love you too, Clara's voice broke. Please come back. Both of you. Please. Maylene stepped into the storm before she could lose her nerve. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing breath and thought. Snow drove horizontally, stinging any exposed skin. Visibility was maybe 10 feet on a good moment, less when the wind gusted. Maylene tied one end of the rope to the porch railing and the other around her waist, a lifeline back to the cabin if she got turned around. She had maybe 30 feet of rope, not nearly enough to search far, but enough to mark a path, to keep from losing herself completely. She headed in the direction Caleb had ridden that morning, trying to remember landmarks he'd mentioned. The creek was east. The fence line ran north from there. If he'd followed his usual pattern, he should be somewhere within a mile radius. 1 mile. In a blizzard, with darkness coming. Maylene pushed forward, calling his name into the wind. The storm swallowed her voice, threw it back at her mocking and small. Her feet found uneven ground, stumbled over hidden rocks and frozen brush. Cold seeped through her coat, her gloves, worked into her bones with relentless patience. She walked until the rope went taut, then untied it and secured it to a sturdy tree. Another 30 feet of progress. She did this 3 times, creating a breadcrumb trail back to safety, moving deeper into the white void. On the 4th extension, she nearly walked into the horse. The mare stood with her head down, snow piling on her back, utterly miserable but alive. No sign of Caleb. Where is he? Maylene asked the horse, as if she might answer. Where's your rider? She examined the ground around the mare's feet and found tracks. Human footprints leading away from the horse, staggering and uneven. Following them, Maylene discovered why. A ground hole, hidden by snow. The kind ranchers feared, invisible hazards that could snap a horse's leg or throw a rider. Caleb's boot prints showed where he'd hit the ground, hard, then struggled to his feet. The tracks led north, but they were increasingly erratic. He was hurt, possibly concussed. Wandering lost in a storm while injured, Maylene's training kicked in past her fear. Injured people in snow often experienced paradoxical undressing, a sign of severe hypothermia where victims felt burning hot and shed clothing. They also lost the ability to think clearly, to navigate, to make rational decisions. If Caleb had been out here for hours, hurt and freezing, he could be anywhere. Could have walked in circles, could have collapsed somewhere just yards away, invisible in the storm. She had to find him, had to, or Clara would lose her father too. Maylene pushed forward, following the tracks when she could find them, guessing when they disappeared under fresh snow. Her own body was growing dangerously cold, fingers and toes going numb. She knew the signs of hypothermia from her father's teachings, the shivering that eventually stopped, the confusion, the overwhelming urge to sleep. She couldn't let herself feel it, couldn't acknowledge the cold, just had to keep moving, keep searching. Caleb! Her voice was raw from shouting. Caleb Ward, you answer me right now! Nothing. Just wind and snow and the terrible silence of winter trying to claim another life. She nearly missed him. He'd collapsed against a deadfall, a tangle of fallen trees that provided minimal shelter from the wind. His coat was still on, thank heaven, but his hat was gone and snow had accumulated on his still form. No, 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 no. Maylene fell to her knees beside him, pressing fingers to his neck with shaking hands. A pulse, faint and too slow, but there. Caleb, Caleb, wake up. You have to wake up. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Sarah? The name hit Maylene like a slap. Of course. Dying in the snow, his mind would go to his wife, to the woman he'd loved first and completely. No, it's Maylene. You need to get up, Caleb. Need to walk. So cold. His words slurred together. Just want to rest. You can't rest. If you rest, you die. And Clara needs you. Maylene grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. Your daughter needs you. Do you understand? Clara is waiting for you to come home. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Awareness. Clara, he mumbled. Yes, Clara. She made you eggs this morning, remember? And she's waiting for you. So you're going to get up right now and walk back to her. Can't. Leg's broken. Maybe. Can't tell anymore. Maylene examined his leg as best she could through layers of clothing and snow. His left ankle was swollen, possibly fractured from the fall. He couldn't walk on it, and she couldn't carry him. Think. Her father's voice in her head, calm and steady. When the situation seems impossible, break it into smaller possible pieces. She couldn't carry him, but she could drag him. The horse was only 100 yards back, if she could find it again. If she could get Caleb on the horse, the mare might know the way home, even if they didn't. I'm going to get you out of here, she told Caleb, but you have to help me. You have to stay conscious. Can you do that? Tired, his eyes were closing again. No. No sleeping. Maylene slapped his face, not hard but sharp enough to startle him awake. Talk to me. Tell me about Sarah. Tell me about when you met her. Sarah. His voice was dreamy, distant. She was so beautiful, like sunrise over mountains. Didn't think she'd ever look at me twice. But she did. Why? Keep him talking. Keep him present. Said I had kind eyes. Said most white men looked at her people like they were problems to solve, but I looked at her like she was a gift to treasure. He blinked slowly. Was a gift. Best thing that ever happened to me. Maylene's throat tightened, but she kept moving, stripping off his wet gloves and replacing them with her dry ones, wrapping her scarf around his exposed neck. What else? What else did she say? Said we'd build a life together. Have babies, grow old watching sunsets. A sound that might have been a laugh. Got the baby, didn't get the growing old. You're not done growing old yet, Maylene said fiercely. Clara needs you to grow old, to walk her down an aisle someday, to meet her children. You don't get to give up now. She found her rope and tied it around his chest under his arms. Then she began the agonizing work of dragging him backward through the snow. He cried out when his injured leg caught on something, but she couldn't stop. Couldn't be gentle. Could only pull and pray and count the feet between here and survival. The mare was where she'd left her, patient and cold. Maylene had no idea how to get an injured man onto a horse, but desperation made her creative. She positioned the horse near a fallen log, then somehow, using leverage and stubbornness and strength she didn't know she possessed, got Caleb draped over the saddle. He was semi-conscious, mumbling about Sarah and Clara and cold. Maylene tied him secure with the rope, then grabbed the mare's reins. Take us home, she told the horse. Please, take us home. The mare seemed to understand, or maybe horses just naturally move toward warmth and shelter when given the chance. Either way, she began walking with steady determination, and Maylene followed, one hand on the reins and the other supporting Caleb's weight as best she could. The journey back was a nightmare of cold and exhaustion. Maylene's legs shook with every step. Her hands had long since lost feeling. The cabin felt like it should appear any moment, but the storm made every direction look the same. She was on the verge of collapse when she saw it, a faint glow of firelight through the window. Clara had kept the fire burning like she'd been told. The cabin was a beacon in the storm, guiding them home. Clara! Maylene's voice was barely a croak. Clara, help! The door burst open and Clara appeared, her face desperate and terrified. Papa! Help me get him inside, quickly. Together they managed to get Caleb off the horse and through the door. He was barely conscious, his skin frighteningly pale, his breathing shallow. Maylene immediately began stripping off his wet clothes while Clara stoked the fire higher. "Is he going to die?" Clara's voice was small and broken. "Not if I can help it." Maylene wrapped Caleb in every dry blanket they owned, then turned to Clara. "I need warm water, not hot, warm, and more blankets from my room, fast." Clara ran to obey. Maylene turned her attention fully to Caleb, taking his pulse, checking his breathing, assessing the damage. His ankle was definitely broken or badly sprained. He had frostbite on his fingers and ears. His core temperature was dangerously low. But he was alive. And as long as he was alive, she could fight for him. She worked through the night the same way she'd worked to save Clara, with single-minded determination and every skill her father had taught her. She warmed Caleb slowly to avoid shock, massaged circulation back into frozen extremities, splinted his ankle with careful precision. Clara stayed by her father's side, holding his hand and talking to him in a steady stream. She told him about the eggs she'd made, about the bread she'd learned to bake, about how Maylin had gone into the storm to find him even though she was scared. "She was so brave, Papa, and she promised she'd bring you home, and she did. So you have to get better now, okay? You have to wake up and tell her thank you." Around midnight, Caleb's eyes finally opened clear. He looked from his daughter to Maylene and back, confusion giving way to understanding. "You found me," he rasped. "Someone had to." Maylene's hands shook now that the crisis was passing. "You promised Clara you'd come home. I was just making sure you kept your word." "My leg, broken. You'll be off it for weeks, maybe months." She met his eyes. "You nearly died out there, Caleb. Another hour and—" Her voice broke. "Another hour and Clara would have been an orphan. I'm sorry." He reached for his daughter with his good hand. "I'm so sorry, baby girl." Clara collapsed against his chest, sobbing. "I was so scared. I thought you were gone like Mama. I thought I'd lost you too." "Not gone. I'm right here." He held her tight, then looked at Maylene over Clara's head. "Thank you for risking your life, for bringing me back." Maylene couldn't speak. The reality of what she'd done, what she'd almost failed to do, crashed over her. She'd walked into a blizzard with no real plan, nothing but stubbornness and love driving her forward. She could have died. Should have died, probably, but she hadn't, and neither had Caleb. "I made a promise to your daughter," she finally managed. "I don't break promises." "Neither do I," Caleb said quietly. "And I made you one too, remember? Asked you to stay. That offer's still open. More than open. I'm begging now. Stay, Maylene, please. Let us be your family." Clara lifted her tear-stained face. "Please? We need you. I need you. And Papa needs you, even if he's too stubborn to say it most of the time." "I'm saying it now." Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. "I need you. Not because you saved my life or because you're good with Clara. I need you because when I thought I was dying in that snow, you were what I saw. Not Sarah, not the past. You. The woman who makes my daughter laugh, who challenges me to be better, who fits into our broken places like she was made to be here." Maylene's eyes burned. "I'm terrified." "So am I." He reached for her hand with his good one. "But maybe that's how we know it matters. If it didn't scare us, it wouldn't be worth having." Clara grabbed Maylene's other hand. "Please say yes. Please. I can't lose another Mama. I can't." The word hung in the air. Mama. Not Maylene. Mama. Maylene looked at these two people. The man who'd offered her shelter when she had nothing, the child who'd claimed her heart with a simple question. She'd spent weeks trying to protect herself from exactly this moment, from wanting something so badly it could destroy her. But Clara was right. Being brave didn't mean not being scared. It meant doing the thing anyway because it mattered more than the fear. And this mattered. They mattered. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll stay." Clara's sob of relief was echoed by Caleb's shaky laugh. He pulled Maylene down into an awkward three-person embrace, the three of them tangled together in blankets and firelight and something that felt impossibly like hope. "Can you be my mommy forever?" Clara asked, echoing her question from that first day on the train platform. Maylene pressed a kiss to the child's hair, then met Caleb's eyes over her head. "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, I can be." Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the small cabin, 3 people held each other close and chose to believe in tomorrow. Dawn came soft and golden the morning after their promise to each other. Maylene woke to find Clara already nestled against her side, the child's breathing deep and peaceful. Across the room, Caleb slept in his chair by the fire where he'd kept watch through the night, his injured leg propped on a stool, his face relaxed in a way she rarely saw when he was awake. This was her family now. The thought settled into her chest like something solid and real, pushing out the old fears that had lived there so long. She eased out of bed carefully so as not to wake Clara and moved to the kitchen to start coffee. Her hands knew the routine now, the measure of grounds, the pump of water, the arrangement of kindling to coax the stove to life. Simple tasks that had become hers through repetition and care. "You're up early." Caleb's voice was rough with sleep. Maylene turned to find him watching her from the chair, his eyes warm in the early light. Couldn't sleep anymore. Too much thinking. Good thinking or bad thinking? Both. She poured water into the coffee pot. Mostly wondering if I'm making the right choice, if staying here is brave or just foolish. Caleb pushed himself upright with a grimace, his ankle clearly still paining him. "There's a difference?" "Usually." Maylene came to help him stand, slipping under his arm to provide support. "Brave means you know the risks and choose anyway. Foolish means you don't see them coming." "And which do you think this is?" He leaned on her more heavily than pride probably wanted, but necessity won out. "I think—" Maylene paused, considering. "I think it's brave to trust you. Foolish to trust myself not to ruin it somehow." "Hey." Caleb's hand found her chin, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "You're not going to ruin anything. You saved my daughter's life twice. You walked into a blizzard to bring me home. You've taken broken things and made them whole. The only foolish thing would be letting you walk away." The certainty in his voice made her throat tight. "You don't know me well enough to be that sure." "I know enough." His thumb brushed her cheek. "I know you're stubborn and kind and brave even when you're terrified. I know you love Clara like she's yours. I know you fit here in ways I can't fully explain, but don't want to live without. That's enough for me." Maylene wanted to argue, to list all the reasons this couldn't work, but Clara's sleepy voice interrupted from the bed. "Are you two being romantic? Because it's too early for that and I'm hungry." Despite everything, Maylene laughed. Caleb released her with a rueful smile, and they moved together through the morning routine, breakfast, dishes, tending the fire. The conversation from the night before hung between them, acknowledged but not dwelt upon. They'd made their choice. Now came the harder part, living it. 3 days later, Mrs. Henderson arrived from town with her usual basket of bread and an unusual amount of nervous energy. "I need to speak with you both," she announced, settling at the table with the air of someone carrying difficult news. "There's talk in town. About you, Maylene. About this arrangement." Maylene's stomach dropped. She'd known acceptance wouldn't come easily, but she'd hoped for more time before facing it. "What kind of talk?" Mrs. Henderson's expression was equal parts sympathy and determination. "Some folks are saying it's not proper, a Chinese woman living with a widower and his child without being married. They're calling it scandalous." "That's ridiculous," Caleb said sharply. "Maylene's been nothing but—" "I know what she's been," Caleb warned, "and so do the people who matter. But you know how this town is, how people are." Mrs. Henderson turned to Maylene. "I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying they're talking, and talk has a way of becoming trouble if it's not addressed." Maylene felt the familiar weight of judgment settling on her shoulders. She'd carried it in China, in San Francisco, and now here. Always too much of one thing, not enough of another. Never quite fitting the shape others wanted her to fill. "What do you suggest?" Her voice was steady even as her hands trembled in her lap. "Make it official. Get married before the gossip takes root." Mrs. Henderson's tone was practical. "Not because you need to prove anything to those busybodies, but because legal marriage provides protections. For you, for Clara, for this family you're building." Caleb's hand found Maylene's under the table, squeezing gently. We've already decided to marry. Just hadn't set a date yet. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. Have you now? Well, that's good news indeed, though I'd recommend sooner rather than later. Give people something concrete to accept rather than something vague to speculate about. After she left, Maylene stood at the window, watching snow fall in lazy spirals. Caleb came up behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. I'm sorry, he said quietly, about the talk, about people making judgments when they don't know anything. I'm used to it. The words came out more bitter than intended. People have been judging me since birth. Chinese in a British colony, British in a Chinese family, woman in a profession meant for men. Now it's Chinese in a white town, unmarried woman in a widower's house. The reasons change, but the judgment stays the same. Then let's remove their ammunition. Caleb moved to stand beside her. Marry me. Not because Mrs. Henderson says we should or because the town's talking. Marry me because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Maylene's laugh was half sob. You're terrible at romantic speeches. I know, but I mean every word. He took her hand, turning her to face him. I'm asking you to marry me, Maylene Zhao. Not someday or eventually. Soon. As soon as we can arrange it. Will you? She looked at him, really looked. Saw the hope and fear warring in his expression, the vulnerability it cost him to ask, the steadiness beneath it all. This man who'd lost everything and somehow found the courage to risk his heart again. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Clara, who'd been suspiciously quiet during Mrs. Henderson's visit, emerged from her room with a whoop of delight. I knew it! I knew you'd say yes! Were you listening? Caleb tried for stern but couldn't quite manage it. Of course I was listening. This is important. Clara threw her arms around both of them. When's the wedding? Can I be in it? What will you wear? The questions tumbled out in a cascade, and Maylene found herself laughing despite the weight of what she'd just agreed to. This child, this fierce, loving child, had claimed her as family from the first moment. Now it would be official, legal, permanent. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. They set the date for 2 weeks hence. Enough time to make simple preparations, but not so long that gossip could build into something more damaging. Mrs. Henderson took charge of arrangements with the efficiency of a field general, declaring that Maylene would be married properly even if it was a small ceremony. You'll need a dress, she announced, appearing at the cabin 3 days later with fabric draped over her arms. Nothing fancy, but something that says respectable wife to those narrow-minded fools in town. I can sew my own dress, Maylene protested. I'm sure you can, but you're going to let me help because that's what friends do, and whether you like it or not, I've decided we're friends. Mrs. Henderson's tone brooked no argument. Besides, I'm a better seamstress than you are. No offense. None taken, Maylene said, too touched to argue further. They spent the afternoon cutting and pinning fabric while Clara watched with fascination. The dress that emerged was simple but elegant, cream-colored cotton with careful stitching and a modest neckline. Nothing like the elaborate gowns Maylene had seen in San Francisco shop windows, but perfect for a Montana winter wedding. You'll be beautiful, Mrs. Henderson declared, standing back to survey her work. That Caleb Ward won't know what hit him. Maylene studied her reflection in the small mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. She'd arrived in Montana with nothing, expecting nothing, and somehow ended up with everything she'd never dared to hope for. Thank you, she said quietly, for all of this, for accepting me when others won't. Mrs. Henderson's expression softened. People fear what they don't understand. Give them time, and they'll come around, and if they don't, well, their loss. You're good people, Maylene. This town's lucky to have you, whether they know it yet or not. The days before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and small crises. Caleb's ankle healed enough for him to walk without the crutch, though he still limped badly. Clara practiced walking slowly and seriously, preparing to scatter flower petals she'd been collecting and pressing. And Maylene tried not to think too hard about the magnitude of what she was about to do. 2 nights before the ceremony, she woke from a nightmare in a cold sweat. In the dream, she'd been back on the train platform in Billings, watching Caleb and Clara walk away while she stood frozen, unable to follow. The sense of loss had been overwhelming. She rose quietly and went to the main room, stirring the fire back to life and wrapping herself in a quilt. This was foolish. She was marrying the man, not losing him. But old fears had deep roots, and they surfaced in darkness when defenses were low. Can't sleep? Caleb emerged from his room, moving carefully on his healing ankle. Bad dream. Maylene made room for him on the bench near the fire. Nothing important. He settled beside her with a slight grimace. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. She pulled the quilt tighter. Just my mind playing tricks, reminding me of all the ways this could go wrong. Name one. What? Name one way this could go wrong. Caleb's tone was patient. Specifically, not vague fears, actual concrete problems. Maylene considered. You could wake up one day and realize you've made a terrible mistake, that you married me out of gratitude or obligation or because Clara wanted it, not because you actually want to spend your life with me. That's not a concrete problem. That's your fear talking. Caleb took her hand. Try again. Real problems we might actually face. The town could make things difficult, refuse to do business with you because you married a Chinese woman, make Clara's life hard because her stepmother is different. Better. He nodded. That's a real possibility. What else? I could get sick, or you could, or Clara. We could lose the ranch. I could be a terrible mother. You could realize you still love Sarah too much to make room for me. The words came faster now, all the terrors she'd been holding at bay. We could hurt each other without meaning to. I could disappoint you. You could regret this. Caleb listened without interruption, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. When she finally ran out of fears, he was quiet for a long moment. Those are all possible, he said finally. Every single one of them could happen. Marrying me doesn't guarantee happiness or safety or smooth sailing. It just means we face those possibilities together instead of alone. That's supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. He shifted to face her more fully. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. Can't promise people won't judge you or that I'll never make mistakes or that loving me won't sometimes hurt. But I can promise I'll be here, that I'll choose you every day, even on the hard days, that you'll never face anything alone as long as I'm breathing. Maylene's eyes stung. How are you so certain? After everything you've lost, how can you risk loving someone again? Because the alternative is worse. His voice was rough with emotion. I spent a year after Sarah died just existing, going through motions, doing what needed doing, feeling nothing much of anything. That's not living, Maylene. That's just waiting to die. You reminded me what it feels like to actually live, to want more than just making it through another day. I'll risk heartbreak 1,000 times over rather than go back to that gray nothing. She understood. She'd been living in that same gray nothing since her father's death, moving from place to place, surviving but not thriving, too afraid of loss to reach for anything real, until a child's simple question had cracked her open and let the light back in. I'm still scared, she admitted. Good. Means it matters. Caleb pulled her close, tucking her against his side. We'll be scared together, and maybe that'll be enough. They sat by the fire until dawn began to gray the windows, not talking much, just being present with each other. When Clara woke and found them there, she climbed onto the bench between them without a word, creating a warm knot of family that felt more real than any ceremony could make it. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Maylene dressed in her new gown with hands that only shook a little, while Mrs. Henderson fussed with her hair and Clara provided running commentary on everything. You look like a princess, Clara declared. Papa's gonna cry. Your papa doesn't cry, Maylene said. He does when he thinks nobody's watching. I've seen him. Clara's tone was matter of fact. He cried when Mama died, and when I got sick that first time, and once when he was looking at you teaching me to write Chinese letters. Happy tears that time, I think. The image of Caleb moved to tears by watching her with his daughter made Maylene's chest ache. She knelt carefully, mindful of her dress, and took Clara's hands. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For asking if I could be your mama forever, for not letting me leave that first day, for choosing me. Maylene's voice cracked. I wouldn't be here without you. Clara threw her arms around Maylene's neck. And I wouldn't have a mama without you. We saved each other. Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat loudly. If you two make her cry and ruin her face paint, I'll have words with both of you. Now come on, we've got a wedding to get to. The ceremony was held in the cabin with only a handful of witnesses. Mrs. Henderson, the McGregors, a few other neighbors who'd proven themselves genuine friends. The Reverend was a kind-faced man who'd known Caleb since childhood and seemed more interested in the couple's happiness than in anyone's ethnic background. Caleb stood by the fireplace in his good clothes, his weight still favoring his healing ankle, but his posture straight and proud. When Maylene entered on Mrs. Henderson's arm, his expression transformed, wonder and joy and something deeper that made her knees weak. The Reverend's words washed over her in a blur. She spoke her vows in a voice that didn't shake, promising to love and honor and cherish this man who'd given her a home when she had none. Caleb's own vows were simple and direct, his rough voice steady as he pledged his life to hers. When the Reverend pronounced them married, Caleb kissed her gently while Clara cheered and the small gathering applauded. It was simple and perfect and utterly theirs. No grand gestures or elaborate ceremony, just two people choosing each other in front of witnesses who cared. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. Mrs. Henderson had baked a cake that Clara declared the best thing she'd ever tasted. The McGregors brought wine they'd been saving for a special occasion. Someone produced a fiddle and there was music, laughter, warmth despite the bitter cold outside. Maylene found herself swept into conversations with people she barely knew, all of them offering congratulations with varying degrees of sincerity. Some were genuinely happy, others were merely polite. A few looked like they were reserving judgment. She understood. Trust had to be earned, especially when you looked different, spoke differently, came from somewhere they couldn't imagine. She'd prove herself through time and consistency, the same way she always had. Happy? Caleb appeared at her elbow, offering a cup of cider. Overwhelmed, Maylene admitted. But yes, happy. Good. He glanced around the crowded cabin. I know it's not much. It's everything. She cut him off. Don't apologize for giving me exactly what I needed. His smile was soft and private, meant only for her. Dance with me? I don't know how. Neither do I, really. We'll figure it out together. He led her to the small, clear space near the fire, while the fiddle player launched into a simple waltz. They moved awkwardly at first, Maylene stepping on his feet and Caleb grimacing when weight landed wrong on his healing ankle. But gradually, they found a rhythm, clumsy but genuine. I love you, Caleb said quietly, the words meant only for her. Just wanted to say it proper. I love you, Maylene Ward. The new name settled over her like a blessing. Maylene Ward. No longer Zhao from Guangdong, no longer the woman nobody wanted. Now she was Ward, wife, mother, healer, someone who belonged. I love you too, she whispered back, even though you can't dance. His laugh rumbled against her. Good thing you married me for my other qualities. What other qualities? I make decent coffee, can fix almost anything, and I'm excellent at killing spiders. High praise indeed. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I suppose I'll keep you. They swayed together while Clara danced with Mrs. Henderson and neighbors chatted over cake and the fire crackled warm against the winter cold. This was her wedding day, nothing like what she might have imagined as a girl in China, but perfect in its simplicity and truth. As evening approached and guests began departing, Clara grabbed both Maylene and Caleb's hands. Can we go outside, just us three? I want to see the stars. They bundled into coats and stepped into the crystalline night. The sky was enormous and clear, stars scattered like diamonds across black velvet. Their breath misted white in the freezing air. Mama used to say every person is a star, Clara said softly. That when people die, they go up there and watch over the ones they loved. Do you think she's watching now? Caleb's arm tightened around Maylene's shoulders. I think if anyone's up there, she's happy for us. Happy you've got someone to love you the way you deserve. I think so too. Clara tilted her head back, studying the vast expanse above. There's so many. How do you know which one is which person? Maybe you don't need to know, Maylene said. Maybe they're all watching together, all the people who loved us, all the people we've lost. Maybe they're glad we found each other down here. They stood together in the cold, three people bound by choice and love and stubborn hope. A family not by blood, but by decision. The daily decision to stay, to try, to believe in something bigger than individual fear. After a while, Clara yawned hugely. "Can we go back inside? I'm freezing." "Come on then." Caleb scooped her up despite his ankle, carrying her toward the warm glow of the cabin. "Let's get you to bed." Maylene followed them inside, closing the door on the star-filled night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, work to be done, judgments to face, the ongoing effort of building a life together. But tonight they were simply family, warm and safe and together. Later, after Clara was asleep and the cabin was quiet, Maylene stood at the window of the bedroom she now shared with Caleb. This room that had been Sarah's, that held the ghost of a woman she'd never know but would always honor. It should have felt wrong, stepping into a dead woman's place. But it didn't, because she wasn't replacing Sarah. She was becoming herself. Maylene Ward, healer and wife and mother. Someone who'd traveled impossible distances to find this impossible home. "You all right?" Caleb emerged from checking on Clara, moving carefully on his healing ankle. "Just thinking." Maylene turned from the window. "About how strange life is. How one cruel joke brought me here. How the worst thing that happened to me led to the best thing. Sarah used to say the universe has a sense of humor." Caleb came to stand beside her. "That what looks like disaster in the moment sometimes turns out to be exactly what you needed, just not in the package you expected." She sounds like she was very wise. She was. He took Maylene's hand. "And I think she'd like you. Think you two would have been friends, actually. You've got the same quiet strength, same way of seeing through people's nonsense to what's real underneath." The comparison should have stung, being measured against his first wife. Instead, it felt like acceptance. Like Caleb saw both women clearly and loved them for who they were, not who he wished them to be. "I'll try to honor that," Maylene said. "Try to be worthy of this family she built, and you're trusting me to help maintain." "You already are." Caleb pulled her close. "You saved my daughter's life. Saved mine too, probably. You've made this house feel like a home again instead of a monument to loss. That's more than worthy. That's miraculous." She leaned into his warmth, letting herself believe it, letting herself accept that maybe, possibly, she'd earned this happiness through all the pain that came before, that the universe's cruel joke had turned into the greatest gift of her life. Outside, wind whispered around the cabin's corners and stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Inside, a new family slept, bound by choice and hope and the stubborn belief that love could transcend every boundary that tried to contain it. And in the morning, Maylene would wake as a wife for the first time, would rise to tend her family and her work, to face whatever judgments or challenges the day brought, would continue the quiet, persistent work of building a life from nothing but determination and love. But tonight, she simply held her husband close and let herself rest. Let herself believe in tomorrow. Let herself be, finally and fully, home. The woman nobody wanted had become the woman someone chose. And in that choosing, both their lives had been transformed. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The weeks that followed the storm moved with the slow, careful rhythm of healing. Caleb's ankle mended in increments. First the swelling reduced, then the bone began to knit. Then finally he could bear weight without the makeshift crutch Maylene had fashioned from an old broom handle. Through it all, he remained confined mostly to the cabin, a man accustomed to constant motion forced into stillness. It made him restless, irritable, and then, gradually, something else entirely. "You're hovering again," he said one morning, as Maylene checked the splint for what was probably the 5th time that day. "I'm ensuring proper healing," she corrected, not looking up from her work. "There's a difference." "Is there? Because it feels a lot like you don't trust me to sit still without supervision." "That's because 3 days ago I found you trying to chop wood on one leg." She met his eyes with raised eyebrows. "So no, I don't trust you to sit still without supervision." Clara giggled from where she sat at the table practicing her letters. "She's got you there, Papa." Caleb's scowl softened when he looked at his daughter. "Whose side are you on?" "The side that keeps you alive." Clara returned to her work with exaggerated focus. "Maylene says stubborn men are the hardest patients because they think they know better than their own bodies." "I never said that," Maylene protested. You were thinking it very loudly. Despite himself, Caleb laughed. The sound still surprised Maylene how easily it came now, how often. The man who'd been so shuttered and careful when she first arrived had slowly opened like a flower toward sunlight. Not completely, not all at once, but enough that she could see the person he'd been before grief had carved him hollow. "Your ankle's healing well," Maylene announced, finishing her examination. "Another few weeks and you should be able to walk without the crutch. Full weight bearing in maybe 6. 6 weeks. Caleb's frustration was palpable. Spring planting starts in less than that. The fence line needs repairs. The roof's got a leak over the barn. And all of it will still be there when you're healed. Maylene sat back on her heels. Pushing too hard, too fast will only set you back further. You know this. Knowing it and liking it are two different things. Most true things are uncomfortable, Maylene agreed. That's how you recognize them. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary. Something passed between them, awareness, attraction, the growing certainty that what was happening here was more than convenience or circumstance. It terrified Maylene as much as it thrilled her. She stood quickly, brushing off her skirts. "I'm going to check on the chickens. Clara, do you want to come? Can I collect the eggs?" "If you're careful." They bundled into coats and scarves and stepped into the March morning. Winter was loosening its grip, slowly, reluctantly, but definitively. Ice melted in the noon sun even if it refroze by night. Birds had started returning, their calls sharp and bright in the crystalline air. Clara skipped ahead toward the chicken coop, her breath pluming white. Maylene followed more slowly, letting her eyes trace the familiar landscape. Somewhere in the past months, this place had stopped being Caleb's ranch and started being home. She wasn't sure exactly when the shift had happened. Maybe when she'd learned which floorboard creaked by the fireplace, or when she'd stopped asking permission to rearrange the kitchen shelves, or when she'd started thinking in terms of we instead of they. "Maylene?" Claire's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." The child bit her lip, suddenly hesitant. "When you marry Papa, can I call you Mama? Or would that make you sad because you'd think about your real Mama who died?" The question hit Maylene like a physical blow. She stopped walking, her heart suddenly too large for her chest. "When I marry your Papa?" "You're going to marry him, right?" Clara looked genuinely confused. "You said you'd stay forever, and people who stay forever get married. That's how it works." "That's not exactly how it works." Maylene struggled to find words. "Your Papa and I haven't discussed marriage." "Why not?" Why not indeed, because Maylene was afraid. Because part of her still waited for the other shoe to drop, for Caleb to wake up and realize he didn't actually want a Chinese woman raising his daughter and sharing his name. Because permanent decisions required a kind of faith she wasn't sure she possessed. "Marriage is complicated," she said finally. "Papa says that's what people say when they're scared to tell the truth." Clara studied her with those two knowing eyes. "Are you scared?" "Yes," Maylene admitted. "I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of wanting something this much. Of believing I get to keep it." She knelt in the snow so they were eye level. "I lost everyone I ever loved, Clara. My mother, my father, my whole life in China. I came here with nothing but a forged letter and false hope. And then I found you and your Papa. And this started to feel real. But real things can be lost too, and I don't know if I could survive losing this." Clara was quiet for a long moment, her small face serious. Then she reached out and took Maylene's hand. "Mama used to say that being afraid to love something because you might lose it is like being afraid to live because you might die. She said all the best things are scary because they matter so much." Clara squeezed Maylene's fingers. "You matter to me, and I think I matter to you too. So maybe being scared just means we're doing something important." Maylene's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. This child, 6 years old and already wiser than most adults Maylene had known. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just keep forgetting," Clara smiled. "So can I call you Mama?" The word landed in Maylene's chest like a seed taking root. Mama. Not a replacement for Sarah. Nothing could be that. But something new, something chosen rather than given by blood. "Yes," Maylene whispered. "Yes, you can call me Mama." Clara threw her arms around Maylene's neck with enough force to nearly knock them both over. I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweetheart. Maylene held her close, breathing in the smell of wool and child and cold air. So much. They collected eggs together, Clara chattering happily about everything and nothing. When they returned to the cabin, Caleb took one look at Maylene's face and raised his eyebrows in question. Clara has decided we're getting married, Maylene said before she could overthink it. Caleb's expression went carefully blank. Has she now? Uh-huh. Clara deposited the egg basket on the table with satisfaction. And she said I could call her Mama, so you need to ask her proper, Papa. With a ring and everything. Clara, Caleb and Maylene spoke simultaneously, then stopped and looked at each other. The child was utterly unrepentant. What? You're both being silly about it. You already act married, you make dinner together and argue about how much wood to use, and she fixes your ankle, and you look at her like she hung the moon. Just make it official so we can be a real family. We are a real family, Caleb said quietly. Don't need a piece of paper to make that true. But I want the paper. Clara's voice took on a stubborn edge. I want people in town to know Maylene is my mama for real. I want her to have our name so nobody can say she doesn't belong here. I want... Her voice cracked. I want to stop being scared she'll leave. Silence fell heavy in the small cabin. Maylene's throat closed around words she didn't know how to speak. Caleb stared at his daughter with an expression caught between love and pain. Clara, he said gently, marriage is between Maylene and me. It's not something you can decide for us. I know. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. But I'm asking, please. I already lost one mama. I can't lose another. The naked fear in those words broke something in Maylene. She crossed to Clara and pulled her into an embrace. You're not going to lose me. Marriage or not, I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Clara's voice was muffled against Maylene's shoulder. I promise. Maylene met Caleb's eyes over Clara's head. I'm staying, for good. I chose this family, and that choice doesn't expire just because there's no ring involved. Caleb's expression was unreadable, but something shifted in his eyes. We should talk, he said quietly, after Clara goes to bed. The rest of the day passed in strange tension. Clara seemed satisfied by Maylene's promise and returned to her normal, cheerful chatter. But Maylene felt Caleb's gaze following her as she moved through familiar tasks, and her heart wouldn't settle into its normal rhythm. That night, after Clara was tucked in and the cabin was quiet except for the crackling fire, Caleb gestured to the chair across from his. Sit with me? Maylene sat, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire popped and hissed. Outside, wind whispered around the cabin's corners. I need to tell you something, Caleb said finally. About Sarah. About us. Maylene's stomach tightened, but she nodded. I loved her. His voice was rough. Loved her completely. She was my best friend, my partner, the person I wanted to build a whole life with. When she died, I thought that was it. That I'd used up my one chance at that kind of love, and I'd spend the rest of my life going through motions for Clara's sake. Each word landed like a stone in still water. Maylene kept her face carefully neutral, even as her heart cracked. But then you showed up on that train platform with nowhere to go and eyes that had seen too much loss. And Clara took one look at you and decided you belonged here. And I thought she was being a child, making up stories to fill the hole her mama left. He paused, reaching for coffee that had long since gone cold. I was wrong. Clara saw something I was too scared to see, that you weren't a replacement or a substitute. You were just you. Someone who fit into our broken places not because you were trying to fix them, but because your broken places aligned with ours. Maylene's breath caught. Caleb, let me finish. He set down the cup and leaned forward, his eyes intense on hers. I don't love you the same way I loved Sarah. That wouldn't be fair to either of you, but I love you in a way that's just as real, just as deep. You're not my second chance. You're my new beginning. And if you'll have me, I'd like to make that official. The words hung in the air between them. Maylene stared at him, her mind unable to process what she'd just heard. Are you asking me to marry you? I am. Though I know I'm doing it backwards. Supposed to have a ring first, supposed to get down on one knee. A small smile touched his lips. but I've never been good at doing things proper. I just know that I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. Want to raise Clara together. Want to build something that's ours. Not mine or yours, but ours. I don't have anything to bring to a marriage, Maylene said, her voice barely above a whisper. No money, no property, no family name worth claiming. You have everything that matters. Caleb reached across the space between them and took her hand. You have skill and courage and a heart big enough to love a child who isn't yours by blood. You have strength I can lean on and softness I can rest against. You have a laugh that makes this cabin feel like home. That's worth more than any dowry. Tears spilled down Maylene's cheeks before she could stop them. I'm still scared. So am I. He squeezed her hand. But Clara's right. Being scared just means it matters. And you matter to me, Maylene Zhao, more than I thought I'd ever let anyone matter again. She studied his face in the firelight, the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the calluses on his hands from years of hard work. This was a man who'd loved and lost and somehow found the courage to try again. And he was offering her not just his heart, but his daughter's future, his name, his life. How could she say anything but yes? All right, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. The smile that broke across Caleb's face transformed him. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close enough that she could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. Thank you, he murmured into her hair. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for being worth choosing. They held each other as the fire burned low, two people who'd lost everything finding something neither had dared to hope for, a second chance at family, at love, at home. The next morning, Clara took one look at their joined hands and faces and let out a whoop of delight. You said yes! I said yes, Maylene confirmed, laughing as the child launched herself into a spinning dance around the kitchen. When's the wedding? Can I wear Mama's good dress? Can we have cake? Can we invite the whole town? Slow down, Caleb said, but he was grinning. We haven't planned anything yet. Why not? Let's plan it now. Clara grabbed Maylene's hand and pulled her toward the table. We need flowers and music and, oh, we should do it in spring when everything's blooming. Mama always said spring was for new beginnings. Maylene and Caleb exchanged glances over Clara's head, both fighting smiles. Spring sounds perfect, Maylene agreed. But a small ceremony, just us and maybe a few neighbors. And the reverend, Clara added practically. You need a reverend to make it official. The reverend, then. Caleb's ankle had healed enough that he could stand without the crutch for short periods. He did so now, crossing to a shelf and retrieving a small wooden box. But first we need to make it proper. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band, thin and worn, with a subtle pattern etched into the metal. This was my grandmother's. She wore it for 47 years before she passed. It's not fancy, but it's strong. Lasted through everything life threw at it and came out the other side still intact. Maylene's vision blurred. It's perfect. Caleb slipped it onto her finger. It fit like it had been waiting for her all along. There. Now you're stuck with us for real. Good. Maylene traced the ring with her thumb, marveling at the weight of it. I don't want to be anywhere else. The weeks until spring passed in a blur of preparation. Word spread through the small community about Caleb Ward's upcoming marriage to the Chinese woman who'd saved his life. Reactions were mixed. Some neighbors were genuinely happy, others merely polite, and a few made their disapproval clear through pointed silence. Maylene learned to distinguish between those who would become true friends and those who would tolerate her presence for Caleb's sake. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house brought fabric for a wedding dress. The McGregors offered their barn for the ceremony if the weather didn't cooperate. Even Tommy Briggs, the boy whose cruel prank had brought Maylene to Montana, appeared at their door with a stammered apology and an offer to help with whatever they needed. I was stupid, he said, unable to meet Maylene's eyes. Thought it was funny. Didn't think about you being a real person with real feelings. I'm sorry. Apology accepted, Maylene said, and meant it. That forged letter had brought her here, to this life, to this family. She couldn't entirely regret it, even if the path had been painful. Through it all, Clara was a whirlwind of excitement and plans. She insisted on helping sew the wedding dress, though her stitches were crooked and had to be redone. She picked wildflowers and pressed them in books so they'd be ready for the ceremony. She practiced walking slowly and seriously, preparing to scatter flower petals down an imaginary aisle. "I've never been in a wedding before," she confessed to Maylene one afternoon while they worked on the dress together. "Will I do it right?" "There's no wrong way to celebrate people choosing to love each other," Maylene assured her. "Just be yourself. That's all anyone needs." "Do you think my first mama would be happy?" The question came quietly, hesitantly. "About you marrying Papa?" Maylene set down her needle and considered carefully. "I think your mama loved your Papa enough to want him to be happy. And I think she loved you enough to want you to have someone who'd care for you after she was gone. So yes, I think she'd be happy, not because I'm replacing her, but because I'm loving the people she loved." Clara nodded slowly. "Mama used to say love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Like how loving me didn't make her love Papa less. It just made more love in the world." "Your mama was very wise." "She was." Clara picked up her needle again. "And I think she'd like you. I think you two would have been friends." The thought settled warm in Maylene's chest. She'd never meet Sarah Ward, never know the woman except through stories and the quilts she'd made and the daughter she'd left behind. But maybe that was enough. Maybe love could transcend even death, making space for new people without erasing those who'd come before. Spring arrived properly in mid-April, not the tentative false starts of March, but the real thing. Green pushed up through brown earth. Birds built nests in the barn eaves. The world smelled of mud and new growth and possibility. They chose a Saturday for the wedding when neighbors could travel without losing too much work time. Maylene woke that morning to find Clara already awake, bouncing with barely contained energy. "It's today! It's today! You're getting married today!" "I'm aware," Maylene said dryly, but she couldn't suppress her smile. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little. Maybe. I was too excited." Clara grabbed Maylene's hands. "Come on, we have to get you ready." The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Mrs. Henderson arrived early to help with Maylene's hair, pinning it up with small white flowers Clara had insisted on. The dress was simple cream-colored cotton, nothing fancy, but it fit well and made Maylene feel like someone worth looking at. "You're beautiful," Clara breathed when Maylene was fully dressed. "Papa's going to forget how to talk." He nearly did. When Maylene emerged from the bedroom, Caleb was standing by the fireplace in his good shirt and vest, looking nervous and hopeful all at once. He froze when he saw her, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "You clean up nice," Maylene said, her own voice not quite steady. "You're stunning." The words came out rough. "I mean, you always are, but—" He stopped, shook his head. "I'm making a mess of this." "You're doing fine." Maylene crossed to him and straightened his collar even though it didn't need straightening. "Nervous?" "Terrified," he admitted, but in a good way, "this matters so much I can barely breathe" way. "I know the feeling." Their guests began arriving around noon. Not many, maybe 15 people total, but enough to make the cabin feel full. The Reverend was a weathered man who'd known Caleb since childhood and seemed genuinely pleased to see him finding happiness again. They held the ceremony outside, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Clara stood beside Maylene, holding a basket of flower petals and taking her role with utmost seriousness. Caleb's hand shook slightly when he took Maylene's, but his voice was steady as he made his vows. "I promise to honor you," he said, "to respect where you came from while building where we're going, to love you not as a replacement for what I lost, but as a gift I didn't expect to find, to be your partner and your friend and your family for as long as I draw breath." Maylene's own vows came from a place deeper than thought. "I promise to choose you every day, to build a home where we both belong, to love your daughter as my own and raise her to be strong and kind, to believe in this family even when I'm scared because you're worth the fear." The Reverend pronounced them married and Caleb kissed her gently, while Clara cheered and the neighbors applauded. It was simple and perfect and completely theirs. The celebration afterwards was modest. Food shared on blankets spread across the meadow. Music from a neighbor's fiddle. Children running and playing while adults talked and laughed. Maylene found herself surrounded by people who'd started as strangers and were slowly becoming community. As evening approached and guests began departing, Mrs. Henderson pulled Maylene aside. "I'm glad you came here," she said simply. "Glad that foolish boy's prank brought you to people who needed you. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes, Maylene agreed, though I wouldn't recommend it as a strategy. Mrs. Henderson laughed. No, I suppose not. But I'm glad it worked out this way. This family needed you, and I think you needed them too. She was right. Maylene watched Caleb teach Clara a dance step while the fiddler played, both of them laughing when they got it wrong. This was her family, now, not by blood or by accident of birth, but by choice, by the steady accumulation of days spent building something together, piece by piece. That night, after Clara was finally asleep, exhausted from excitement and too much cake, Caleb and Maylene stood on the porch watching stars emerge against the darkening sky. Happy? Caleb asked, his arm around her shoulders. More than I knew how to hope for. Maylene leaned into his warmth. A year ago, I was on a train platform with nothing. Now I have everything. We have everything, he corrected. This is ours. You, me, Clara, this place. All of it belongs to all of us. They stood in comfortable silence, and Maylene thought about the journey that had brought her here. The forged letter and the cruel laughter. The child who'd asked if she could be a mama forever. The man who'd offered shelter and somehow become home. All of it impossible and unlikely and utterly real. The seasons turned as they always did. Summer brought heat and the hard work of tending crops and livestock. Maylene discovered she had a gift for gardening, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn Montana soil with the same patience she'd once used to heal the sick. Caleb's ankle healed fully, leaving only a slight limp when the weather changed. Clara grew taller and bolder, her nightmares fading to occasional shadows rather than constant companions. In the fall, travelers began stopping by the cabin seeking remedies for various ailments. Word had spread about the Chinese woman who knew healing arts, and though some came out of desperation rather than trust, they came nonetheless. Maylene treated them all with the same care her father had taught her. No judgment, just skill and compassion. You should charge more, Caleb said after she'd spent 3 hours setting a broken arm for a rancher who'd paid in eggs and apologies. Money isn't why I do this. Maylene cleaned her instruments with practiced efficiency. My father said healing was about restoring balance. If someone needs help and I can provide it, the payment doesn't matter. Your father sounds like he was a saint. He was human, flawed and stubborn and occasionally wrong, but he believed in something bigger than profit. She met Caleb's eyes. I want to honor that. Want to be the kind of healer he'd be proud of. He would be. Caleb pulled her close. I'm certain of it. By the following spring, their lives had developed rhythms that felt permanent in the best way. Maylene rose early to tend her garden and prepare medicines. Caleb worked the ranch with steady determination. Clara thrived in the careful balance between structure and freedom her parents provided. And then one morning in late April, Maylene woke with a familiar queasiness that had nothing to do with spoiled food. She knew immediately but said nothing, wanting to be certain before raising hopes or fears. 2 weeks later, when the signs were unmistakable, she finally told Caleb. They were alone in the barn, him mending tack while she gathered eggs. She stopped beside him, eggs cradled in her apron, and said quietly, I'm pregnant. His hands stilled on the leather. He looked up at her, eyes wide. You're certain? As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation, but I know the signs. For a moment, he just stared. Then he set down his work and stood, pulling her into an embrace so tight the eggs were in danger. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. Are you happy? Maylene asked against his chest. Or worried? Both, terrified, overjoyed. He pulled back to look at her face. How are you feeling? Nauseated in the mornings, exhausted by evening, completely overwhelmed by the reality of growing a human. She smiled despite the tears gathering in her eyes. And happier than I have words for. They told Clara that night at dinner. The child listened seriously as they explained she was going to be a big sister, her expression cycling through confusion, understanding, and finally pure delight. A baby. A real baby. She looked between them. In our house? In about 7 months, yes, Maylene confirmed. Clara launched herself out of her chair and hugged Maylene's middle with careful enthusiasm. I'm going to be the best big sister ever. I'll teach the baby everything, how to feed chickens and collect eggs and where Papa hides the good cookies and, oh! She pulled back, eyes wide. Will the baby look like you or Papa or me or all different? We'll have to wait and see, Caleb said, but his eyes were suspiciously bright. Can I help pick names? Can I hold the baby? Can I... Clara's questions tumbled over each other in a cascade of excitement. They let her chatter herself out, both parents exchanging glances that held equal parts joy and terror. A baby. Another person to love, to raise, to worry over. Another thread binding them together. Pregnancy agreed with Maylene better than she'd expected. Morning sickness faded after the first few months, leaving her with surprising energy and an appetite that made Caleb laugh. She continued her healing work until the 7th month when moving became awkward and exhausting, then reluctantly agreed to focus on preparing for the baby's arrival. Clara threw herself into preparations with characteristic enthusiasm. She helped sew tiny clothes, rearrange the spare room to accommodate a cradle Caleb built from pine, and talked to Maylin's growing belly with earnest advice about being a good baby. You should sleep a lot, she instructed the baby one evening while Maylene sewed. But not too much because then you'll miss all the fun stuff. And you should eat whatever Mama gives you because she makes the best food. And you should definitely learn to laugh because Papa's jokes are terrible, but we laugh anyway to make him feel good. My jokes aren't terrible, Caleb protested from his chair. They really are, Papa. Clara patted his arm consolingly. But we love you anyway. Maylene laughed so hard she had to set down her sewing. This was her life now. These people, these moments. This accumulation of ordinary days that added up to something extraordinary. The baby arrived on an October evening when the aspens had turned gold and the air smelled of approaching winter. Labor came fast and fierce, giving Maylene barely enough time to send Caleb for Mrs. Henderson before the contractions became overwhelming. Clara, to her credit, didn't panic. She held Maylene's hand and sang the Chinese song Maylene had taught her, her small voice steady and sure, even when Maylene's breathing turned ragged. You can do this, Mama, Clara whispered. You're the strongest person I know. Mrs. Henderson arrived just in time, bringing calm competence and steady hands. The birth was difficult but not dangerous, pain that felt endless in the moment, but would fade to memory soon enough. And then suddenly there was a baby, red-faced and squalling, impossibly tiny and utterly perfect. A boy, Mrs. Henderson announced, placing him in Maylene's arms. Healthy lungs on this one. Maylene looked down at her son, and felt the world tilt and resettle into a new configuration. He had Caleb's nose and her dark hair, his skin a perfect blend of both their heritages. He was beautiful and strange, and completely theirs. Caleb entered the room hesitantly, his face pale with worry. Maylene, are you? Come meet your son, she said softly. He approached like a man in a dream, settling on the bed beside her and staring at the bundle in her arms with wonder. He's perfect. He is. Maylene shifted the baby so Caleb could see him better. What should we name him? They'd discussed names for months without reaching consensus. But now, looking at this tiny person who represented their combined histories and shared future, the answer felt obvious. James, Caleb said, after my father, and Zhao for his middle name, so he carries both our families forward. James Zhao Ward. Maylene tested the name. I like it. Clara, who'd been hovering in the doorway, couldn't contain herself any longer. Can I see? Can I hold him? They made room for her on the bed, and Caleb carefully placed the baby in his big sister's arms. Clara cradled him with the exaggerated care of someone who understands the weight of responsibility. Hi, James, she whispered. I'm your big sister, Clara. I'm going to teach you everything important, and I'm going to protect you and love you and make sure you know how lucky you are to have the best mama and papa in the whole world. Maylene met Caleb's eyes over their children's heads. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. No words were needed. They'd built this. A family that had started with a cruel joke and a child's innocent question and became something neither of them could have imagined. The months that followed were exhausting and joyful in equal measure. James proved to be a hungry, colicky baby who rarely slept more than 2 hours at a stretch. Maylene walked miles around the cabin at night, bouncing and shushing, while Caleb tried to keep Clara quiet so everyone could sleep. But even in the hardest moments, when Maylene was so tired she could barely stand, when the baby wouldn't stop crying, when it felt like she'd never sleep again, there was joy. Joy in watching Caleb sing lullabies in his rough voice. Joy in Clara's fierce protectiveness of her baby brother. Joy in the simple fact of family, chosen and built and maintained through love and stubbornness. By James's first birthday, life had settled into new rhythms. The baby had grown into a sturdy toddler who pulled himself up on furniture and babbled constantly in a language only he understood. Clara was 8 now, tall and confident and fiercely devoted to her little brother. And Maylene had become someone she barely recognized from that lost woman on the train platform. She was a wife, a mother, a healer known throughout the county. She'd built a life from nothing, had created family where none existed, had turned a temporary shelter into permanent home. One evening in late autumn, after the children were asleep and the cabin was quiet, Caleb pulled Maylin out onto the porch. A full moon hung low and bright, turning the world silver.
"What are we doing out here, child?" Maylin asked, pulling her shawl tighter against the chill. "I wanted to show you something." Caleb pointed toward the barn, where a new sign hung beside the door. Even in moonlight, Maylin could make out the words, Ward and Zhao Herbal Remedies. "When did you—" She couldn't finish the sentence, her throat too tight. "Had it made in town last month. Figured it was time to make things official." He pulled her close. "You've healed half the county from this cabin. Seems right that people should know where to find you." Maylene stared at the sign, at her name carved into wood and mounted for all to see. She wasn't hiding anymore. Wasn't temporary. She was part of this place, this family, this life. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. For choosing me. For building this with me." She turned in his arms to face him. "I came here with nothing, and you gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Caleb corrected. "I was just going through motions before you arrived. You reminded me how to live instead of just surviving." They stood together under the moon, watching their breath mist in the cold air. Inside, their children slept safe and warm. Around them, the land they'd worked together spread out in familiar patterns. Above, stars wheeled in their eternal dance. "Do you ever regret it?" Maylene asked. Taking in a stranger because your daughter asked?" "Every day," Caleb said, and when she stiffened, he smiled. "I regret that I only have one lifetime to spend with you. Wish I could have known you sooner. Wish I could guarantee we'd have forever." "Forever's not guaranteed for anyone," Maylene said. "But we have now, and tomorrow, and however many days we're given, that's enough." "More than enough." He kissed her gently. "It's everything." They went back inside to warmth and firelight, to children who would wake too early and demand breakfast, to work that never ended and worries that never quite disappeared. They went back to the life they'd built together, imperfect and complicated and utterly theirs. And if Maylene sometimes still thought about that forged letter, about the cruelty that had accidentally become kindness, she did so with gratitude rather than anger, because that letter had brought her here, to this moment, to these people who'd taken a woman with nowhere to go and given her everywhere to be. Clara had asked on that first day if Maylene could be her mama forever. And now, surrounded by family and purpose and home, Maylene finally understood the answer. Yes, she could be. She was. And in the choosing and being chosen, in the daily acts of love and work and faith, they'd all become exactly who they were meant to be. The woman no one wanted had found the family who chose her, and in that choosing, she'd finally come home.